So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call this meeting of the Norfolk Board of Health to order. It is 7 o'clock on October 1st, 2019. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing, which I will now call to order, to discuss further amendments to the regulations of the Norfolk Board of Health restricting the sale of tobacco products. This particular hearing has to do with a proposed prohibition of the sale of mint, menthol, and wintergreen products except in smoking bars and adult-only tobacco stores. So, that is the item up for discussion. Is there any comment from the folks in the audience?
Yes. Mark Foss for the Fletcher Tilton for the Coalition for Responsible Retailing would suggest you not include mint, menthol, and wintergreen in the ban, and that you don't enact the regulations you're contemplating. It doesn't accomplish what you're looking to do. It's unfair, arbitrary, and capricious. Results in litigation. It has in all the other towns, and it probably will here. And it's a consideration I think you should take into account. The FDA compliance rate is 100% over the last 3 years. The stores are not the problem. There may be an underage vaping problem, but they're not getting it from the convenience stores. Stores are in compliance. All you're going to do is hurt the stores without obtaining any health benefit. We've advocated on behalf of use and possession laws, which we believe would be more effective, would target the right group. The punitive measure doesn't need to be something that would follow a minor around for the rest of their lives, but a citation that would get their attention, like any other violation, such as alcohol possession. That's a big no-no for a minor. They can get in trouble for that, but it's illegal to sell alcohol to a minor, but and the minor can get in trouble if they have possession of alcohol, but only the retailer can get in trouble for selling to a minor, and that doesn't make sense. There should be some consequences. We believe that would be useful as far as curbing the underage use without impacting the retailers who are in compliance. We've referred over the several meetings to Dr. Siegel, who's our expert, unpaid expert, I would point out, who argues against these kind of limitations as ineffective, especially with respect to vaping products, which is moot at least for 4 months anyway, because of the usefulness as far as a cessation product from for stopping smoking combustible cigarettes. So there isn't a good faith basis to distinguish mint, menthol, and wintergreen from other combustible cigarettes, and banning them. It just doesn't make sense, and limiting to adult-only stores where you're going to leave the Marlboros and Camels on the shelves, and also refer to the FDA statement in 2018 where they stopped short of suggesting that mint, menthol, and wintergreen be included in a vape ban because of the potential use as a cessation device for smokers of combustible cigarettes, and how that helps keep adult former users from relapsing. So there isn't a good faith basis to include mint, menthol, and wintergreen in the ban, and only allow those sales in adult-only stores. In any event, the e-cig products are subject to a moratorium at this point anyway, and what a Washington Post article from September 12th, I believe, that indicated that so far it appears that the primary, if not exclusive, source of the problems are cannabis products that are used with Juul or e-cigarette devices inappropriately. It's not, we don't believe the heavily regulated and commonly used like Juul and Blue products that are causing the health problems. As that picture becomes clearer, I think the action can be, you can look at it again, but for the time being, there's no point in enacting a mint, menthol, and wintergreen ban with respect to e-cigs, because A, the jury's out and the state has already done that. So at a minimum, I would say, suggest to stay away from that issue for that reason. And, you know, an issue I think you should consider is the impact on the store owners who are compliant. They're not gonna just lose the business from the particular sale of the product you're talking about. They're gonna lose the customer who would come into the store, and these are people that are taxpayers that work hard, and there's negative impact on them when they haven't done anything wrong. So we'd urge you to not enact the regulations, leave the compliant retailers in your town to their business, and they've been effective at keeping, enforcing the age restrictions on mint, menthol, and wintergreen. There's no reason to change the current state of affairs.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments in response to the previous one or on any other topic?
I'm a business owner in town. The golf,
Please identify yourself.
Neil Sufan, the golf station on 242 Denham Street. I've been in town for 4 years. I have never sold to a minor. I've always been in compliance with the law. When the age limit was 18, when it's 21, I have a system in place in the cash register that we have to scan valid IDs for us to sell any tobacco products. Banning menthol, my business is gonna suffer a lot. I'm already suffering with the flavor ban. You know, I lost a lot of sales, but banning the menthol is gonna really affect the business.
So you're saying you were selling a lot of flavored cigarettes or vaping
Well,
products?
before, yeah, we're selling, you know, when we did the flavor ban, it affected the sales.
Oh,
I
that's
saw
the
my
most
sales.
recent ban,
Yes.
the governor ban.
No.
Which ban?
The
Our
flavor,
ban.
the flavored tobacco, you know, like the cigars, the
Yeah.
flavored cigars.
Yeah.
So banning the menthol, like for instance, Newport is the Marlboro of cigarettes in the store. If you ban menthol, it's gonna affect the business heavily. It's about 60% of the store sale, tobacco. And my record speaks for itself. I've never been caught, I've never sold to a minor. I follow the law, you know, we have all the system in place, you know, somebody comes in to buy a cigarette, we have to scan a valid ID. That's the only way we are allowed to sell the cigarettes.
May I ask you, Neil, what's a valid ID? How do you,
Driver's license.
but can you not get a fake driver's license?
I mean, we
So what
do
do
check.
you use to scan, I guess?
We
is
do,
what
we
I'm-
do check the dates, and then we scan, you know?
What do you mean you scan under what? Do you use?
There's a barcode behind the driver's license. If you're underage, it tells you right away, not authorized.
But is it the same type of system that you have to present to air traffic control when you go through the airport so that they can ensure that it is a valid driver's license? Is it that system?
It's something like that, similar. It's
Oh,
like,
but it's not that system.
it's not that system, but it's similar to that. I
We
mean,
appreciate that you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, so we've done whatever we could to, you know, uphold the law. I'm against selling to minors, obviously, you know. I don't smoke, but, you know, the other people that, you know, they have the choice to smoke, you know. We can't tell them no, you know. So I hope you reconsider, because it's really gonna affect me very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other, yes, Doctor?
So, I don't know, it feels like a scratch record listening to to all of this, I just reiterate, I'm giving you science data showing that 75% is through retail stores, not the internet and things at this point. In case you haven't seen mentholated Juul, that's mentholated Juul as well, and these are the ones before. If you don't do mint and menthol, okay, and I've been at the State House, up and down the State House talking to people, if towns don't do mint and menthol, then it's not gonna happen. And I'm sorry for this term, but you have a half-ass regulation. This is the new product, IQOS, okay? This is gonna try to get around every reg you have. Heat, not burn, okay? So imagine, this will take care of the vape problem, and this will take care of, for them to get around, and the burn problem, the combustible tobacco. So, this is waiting in the wings to give to our kids. IQOS is actually on Amazon. I bought this on Amazon. This is what Philip Morris wants to put out. If you don't ban mint and menthol, we're back where? What's the number one flavor in schools now? What's the number one flavor Juul sells? Mint, okay? Mint to kids. And the rate of juuling is not going down. These gentlemen talk about the benefits with smoking with mint and menthol. 8 times more vaping in our teenagers than adults. So they've lied about people trying to get off with this. This is actually an adolescent nicotine addiction initiation device. Every day I'm talking to 5 or 10 adolescents about mint and menthol, and they use mint and menthol. In Canada, 30% of African Americans use menthol. In this country, 98% do. Why? Because they've targeted the African American population with huge ads. You don't think they won't be successful with their kids in homework apps, Instagram, and all those other ways that they're going to get to them? By the way, morphing a business is the key to keep it alive. I mean, we've known for years this is a very unhealthy product. Even though when I went to your Dunkin' Donuts here, they just got a Baskin-Robbins. I started talking to, not that that's healthy either, but the Baskin-Robbins, the lady behind there, said, how's it going? I said, oh man, it just gets so busy. It's booming. Why don't the convenience store people think like this? I have convenience store owners in my office. They opened up a bakery when the cigarette taxes skyrocketed because they know how to morph a business. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for this as well. So, and then I think that was all I wanted to say. And as far as right of choice, I wanted to talk about that a little bit, okay? Can I show you this? I can show this. Do you know what that is? That's the Croix de Guerre, the Cross of War, the highest medal of honor in France. My grandfather was a grunt. He was a doughboy. He was shot in mustard gas. God bless the man. I don't know how his lungs survived. He smoked the rest of his life, unfiltered Camels. Totally damaged. You know, didn't socialize with anybody, had a lot of PTSD symptoms. I would cut his nails, and everything was just literally brown. The whole house stunk up as well with it. How old do you think a 60 or 70-year-old person who smokes, how old do you think they were when they started?
My dad was 15.
Yes. So when you look at this, right of choice, what does the right of choice happen when that person is 15 when they start? Okay? Is that a right of choice? Because now they're 70, their brain is rewired to permanent addiction. Is that a right of choice? Their brain is damaged. Because if you talk to people who get off cigarettes and they walk by somebody, what do they feel like? Oh, that just brings back memories, and I'd love to do it again. Because they're wired still for this. And the right of a minor to be, their brain rewired to a permanent addiction like nicotine. And then for a person at 70 say, I have a right to this. Well, you didn't when you were at 15. You should have made a better choice, but you don't because your judgment's off. I tell kids until they're 25, you're judgmentally impaired. You know, you're going to do stupid things. Your parents are going to ask you, why'd you do it? What's your response? I don't know. And I said, that's right, because you're impulsive. You're a sensation-seeking, impulsive creature. Up until you're almost 25, that is the case. So when I see that they talk about these older people making choices, it upsets me because they didn't when they first started. They weren't given the opportunity. Why don't you wait till 25 and give it to them? Okay? If he wants to do something with menthol and all this, it's going to affect my business. You know what? Give it by prescription only. Nicotine replacement therapy was by prescription only for years. And if the e-cigarette's fine to work with that, I'm not opposed, but you're going to have to get it by prescription. You're not going to put it in a store because that's going to make kids use it. So I'm very happy with the regs you're putting in. I don't have a lot of sympathy for businesses because they could morph and get out of this model that they're in right now if they chose to. And I've been doing this for 7 years now and 180 Board of Health meetings, so I don't understand why they always feel trapped, because you do have options, as I've had to, because I own my own business. And we went from 1,000 patients to 14,000 patients, one house to 3 houses, and 70 employees now. And that took a lot of morphing as well. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the audience? Yes.
Hi, so Mary Cole from the Greater Boston Tobacco Free Community Partnership. Been here a few times. So I just have a letter just with more research from me about menthol specifically. And then I don't know if the superintendent of Kim Phillips sent you a letter. He sent it to me like last minute. So this is a letter in support of the menthol mint wintergreen restriction from the King Philip superintendent.
I did get one from Ian Barr, who is on the Healthy KP Substance Use Prevention Coalition. It's a
Yes.
separate letter.
Okay, yeah, so this one's from the superintendent at KP. And basically what he says is like obvious.
May I read it?
Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I think he took the time to write it, then it should be part of this hearing. Is that appropriate? Okay. Dear Norfolk Board of Health members, and this is from the Paul A. Zinni, Superintendent of Schools, King Philip Regional School District. I am the superintendent of the King Philip Regional School District, and I care deeply about the health and well-being of our students. Thank you for recently voting to restrict flavored tobacco products to adult-only stores. I'm writing to inform the Board of Health that vaping is still a concern at King Philip Schools, and I supported the proposed updates to the regulations that will also restrict all menthol, mint, and wintergreen products to own adult-only stores. I'm concerned that many of our students are addicted to e-cigarettes, and while the school does our best to monitor the bathrooms and keep vaping products out of school, we are aware that vaping products are discreet and students have vaped on school property. This is something that every high school in Massachusetts struggles with. Our students additionally see vaping products on social media, social gatherings, and corner stores. We are unable to control where our youth see and access these products outside of school. Governor Charlie Baker enacted a temporary ban on all vaping products until January 25th, 2020. When this ban is discontinued, mint and menthol vaping products will return to corner stores youth frequent in Norfolk. Mint is a popular flavor used by youth and should continue to be restricted after the ban. Menthol cigarettes and other mint-flavored combustibles continue to be sold in Norfolk stores. I worry that youth who use mint vapes will move on to using combustible products. Research shows youth who vape are about 4 times more likely to smoke cigarettes. Therefore, all menthol, mint, and wintergreen tobacco products should also be restricted to adult-only stores. Our community has a moral obligation to keep our youth safe, and we have a shared responsibility to prevent and reduce nicotine use among youth. I support anything the Board of Health can do to protect our youth and make Norfolk a healthier place to live. Thank you for your hard work in promoting and protecting the health of all residents. That was one letter.
Mhm.
And there's another letter from this individual is Ann Barr, and she is a grandparent guardian to 2 grandchildren who attend KP Regional District Schools. And she is also a member of the Healthy KB Substance Use Prevention Coalition formed in October of 2018. And she is also asking that we restrict mint and menthol flavors.
Sure, so just if you, I mean, I've been here a million times, so you guys kind of understand my stance on this as well. And we know that it's not just about selling these products at stores that, you know, some retailers are good, they don't sell, but it's about the exposure of these products as well. And it's also something really, like the superintendent mentioned, to consider that there's a ban right now, and what's gonna happen after that ban? Are we gonna put, you know, all these vaping products back in with the mint flavors? And just something that with menthol cigarettes particularly, I think with mint and all these flavored vape, it's kind of, you know, the same thing with the other flavored products, but with menthol cigarettes, menthol cigarettes are really important to the tobacco industry, and I think that's really important to understand of why there's a lot of pushback from those, you know, in the works with the tobacco industry. Menthol is an anesthetic that makes it easier, the smoke easier to go down, and it's easier to get addicted that way, and it also makes it harder to quit. So that's more so than with normal cigarettes. And so that's really, really important to the tobacco industry, because people are more likely to be hooked on these products, so they make more of a profit. So that's why we see a lot of pushback on here. We also know that with menthol, that the tobacco industry has targeted communities of color, particularly African American communities, and it's like, I have research on there as well, and just the way that the tobacco industry infiltrated the black community was just really horrible. And African Americans die at higher rates and have higher morbidity, mortality rates than white people due to this specific targeting by the tobacco industry with this product that makes it easier to start and harder to quit. We also know with menthol cigarettes that they're more popular among young people and also LGBTQ as well, because they were also targeted by the tobacco industry in these ways. And again, if we have all the flavored vaping products out of stores, we know that menthol cigarettes are more appealing to young people, so it's important to get those out as well. I think that's probably it. We also know with vaping products that they're not a cessation device. I think that was mentioned before. They're not a cessation device. They're not proved. If people try to use them, they most likely they continue using cigarettes, dual using and using e-cigarettes, and there's no proof to show that they quit. But yes, I guess that's it.
Thanks. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Not to be repetitive, I just hear from the school department as well. I'm the director of wellness currently for the Norfolk, Plainville, Rentham, and King Philip schools.
Will you identify yourself?
Yes, Dot Pearl.
Dot Pearl?
Dot Pearl.
Okay.
The districts were lucky that they had a collaborative grant to hire a wellness director, and we're working on a number of projects for them at this time. And this afternoon got an email that Mr. Zinni was unable to be here. He's at another meeting tonight. That he did his letter because he really highlighted some of the points that we wanted to make, but he did want to apologize for not being here, but also make sure that he's really supportive of the ban. And I know he's come and presented before. At the high school, last youth risk behavior survey, 40% of students in grades 9 through 12 reported lifetime use already of vaping products. 30% said that they had used current use within the last 30 days prior to that survey. At the middle school, and now these would be your 8th and 9th grade students who took that survey at the time, there were already 76 students that already reported that they had been vaping. And the increase goes up from 2016 to 2018 very dramatically. And the mint and menthols is something of choice for them. I previously was in a district for 9 years as a dean where we acted as assistant principals, and I had a drawer full of many items that the kids were bringing to school. And 90% of the time it was mint or menthol that the kids were using, and they're finding ways to get it, even if they're not, and I appreciate the store owner that's, said he's doing all he can to monitor, sales, and ages and things, but the kids are getting them from their older siblings, from parents, even in some cases. So, thank you.
I have a question for you. In your survey, did you ever try to track down what the proportions were between over-the-counter sales versus internet versus, sibling acquisition? Is there do you have any data
There are
on that?
numbers related to that. I don't have all those numbers with me tonight, I'm sorry, but the internet sales were surprisingly not as high as I had anticipated that they would be. And there's a pretty good number of students that are still saying that they're receiving them in store, they're getting them in stores. A lot of people report that they're getting them from a friend. We don't know, is that friend an older friend? Is there a friend in the schools that got them from someone else? But most of the kids tend to report they got them from someone else who purchased them somewhere. And I can share that data with you as well, if you'd like.
I also have some data I can share with you guys with access.
Well, do you have the essence of it in terms of how much of it is actually young people sort of walking in and pointing to the cigarette or to the vaping device and making a purchase?
Sarah's looking something up for me.
What is this, I'm missing something, what is this that Dr. Hartman gave us?
That's a survey they
Youth
did
who
with
use
1,200 kids who got to choose each one, and the highest choice was because you could be in either one, in any of those three. But when you looked at the one that had the most number of first choices were the retail stores. And there is clear data showing that, kids that go 1 to 2 times a week to a vape store and a smoking store, most recent was vaping, have a 2.5 times greater chance of using these products. So the exposure is definitely there. I don't have the data with me, but I can get it for you if you'd like. But the exposure makes a huge difference whether they get it there or somebody gives it to them. Some kids will go out of the store, talk to an adult outside, give them money and ask them to go in and get it. So that happens. I know that does because I've talked to kids who said they do that as well, with it. So that's why all the more reason to put it into more of a 21 smoke shop, because the kids hanging around the windows there because they're all glass. They see them maybe, but who knows, with it. And remember, there's a huge amount of work. There's 2 cease and desists by Maura Healy of the 2 highest vape distributors in the state to stop shipping, and it has. And she's having a settlement with Juul. Of course, it's all under wraps now. We're not going to know, and it could take a year, 2 years before we hear it. There will be money for kids and people to get off this stuff, as Charlie Baker is doing now, giving nicotine replacement therapy to Mass Health, and you just do it by copay now for people who are on, because I think we need to be compassionate with the addicted people too, and not just say, tough luck for you. And I do think that there's a $5 million grant, which I'm going to be part of in my practice, because I've joined a substance abuse program at Children's, because nicotine, marijuana, and alcohol are huge problems in kids. So, and we're hoping that they're going to be able to develop better science. And there is no best evidence available and no clinical practice guidelines. We're going to be developing them. That's a tragedy. That's 21% of kids who are in high school will need this program. Maybe not all of them, but definitely a large enough proportion that we're preparing for this disaster. Thank you, Juul. Thank you, Vape. Thank you, Big Tobacco, who's the president of Juul I don't know if it's CEO, CFO, or whatever, of Altria. So has just joined. And Altria owns Marlboro, and rumors have had it they're wanting to bring the Marlboro Man in some form. As you may know, 6 or 7 Marlboro men died of cancer who played it as well.
Anybody else?
So I can't find that right now. We're looking. I do know from Metro West, are you guys in Metro West region?
Yes, the King Philip did that.
Okay, yeah, so I don't have exact numbers, but I do know the most popular way to get it was like bumming by a friend, or like taking a hit of your friends, so that you didn't really own it. But for those who owned it, online was the lowest. And then, and we can send this to you. And then they did get them themselves in retailers, also in retailers that were not in their town was another one, and or they would pay someone to buy them for them. But yeah, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head.
It's kind of hard to see on a phone, but I'm looking through data and I'm trying to see it on a phone, but we can definitely get it to you.
Are there any other comments?
A couple things, that doesn't, yes, they're getting them, but they're not getting them from convenience stores.
That's not true.
The
I asked
100% compliance rates.
I asked what, 4 times a year? Do you have somebody there 365 days a year to watch
It's
people?
not even 4 times a year, it's
Yeah.
once a year.
And excuse me, when kids tell me that they're doing it, they're not lying
Dr.
to me.
Hartman, please, this is not a discussion.
Well, it's a lie.
And one other thing I'd like to submit is a news release by Mass General Hospital on July 23rd of this year, suggesting that daily e-cigarette use may help smokers quit. So there's
There's not clear.
Mass General has suggested that
Yeah,
there is
clear-
value to e-cigarettes as a cessation device.
And Dr. Winikoff, who I know quite well, who is involved in on this at the state, he says CDC has not endorsed these, and if you see on the hearings done on the Hill, Monsies would not say this is a smoking cessation device, because then it would have to be regulated under the FDA. So he stopped that. And I wanted to also mention this idle threat of lawsuits I'm kind of fed up with. All these lawsuits, the preliminary injunctions that were put out by Cumberland Farms and by Somerville were shot down by the judge. And the probabilities the next few months, they're going to shoot it down completely, because these are ludicrous suits. I have 3 towns that are now, people are going to boycotting Cumberland Farms. I asked them to boycott Cumberland Farms because they were sued after I worked with Sharon, Walpole, and Norwood. Norwood did everything throughout all flavors. They had the guts to take on these guys. How much you get paid for this?
Is that relevant?
Yeah, I think it is.
Let's keep the conversation in this direction, come on, you know the rules.
Yeah. So my issue is with this is idle threats, because as the time is going on here, people are realizing the harm, and it's completely absurd. Because 15 to 20% of what these kids have with vaping lung disease, they don't have evidence yet, when they've surveyed these kids, that they've been using e-cigarettes, not with marijuana. So we don't know conclusively. We can suspect all we want. But let's not forget, this is short-term problems, okay? Why do we have to wait for long-term conclusions like we did with cigarettes? First of all, 150 kids with seizures, okay? You've got, from University of West Virginia, data showing in mice now that it is equivalent, 8 months is equivalent to 25 years of somebody on Juul, that the distensibility of the arteries is markedly reduced. What does that mean? Stroke and heart attacks. That's what that means as well. This vaping lung disease that England says they don't have, well, now it's happening. They had just had one case, and now they're all kind of scrambling. Oh my God, are we going to have a problem? Everything that Dr. Siegel uses, okay, is based on British literature. First of all, the Juul pod in this country is outlawed in Britain. It's 20 milligrams per pod in Britain. It's 70 milligrams per pod here. What do you think that motive is? Secondly, he's citing this New England Journal article, which Dr. Winikoff, who is a public health expert on cigarettes that I work with, he testified on the Hill. As you can see, I'm not going to be a person to testify because I'm just too pushy. Thank you. And the point is when you looked at the data and you made the goal in that New England Journal card this year, your goal not just being getting off not nicotine, cigarettes. When you looked at it as getting off cigarettes and nicotine replacement therapy was 2.5 times better Because 80% of the people who started with the e-cigarettes to get off cigarettes were still remained at the end of the year. Only 10% of those on nicotine replacement therapy remained on. So the evidence is not clear at all that this works. And he's based on British data that Dr. Siegel bases it on. Dr. Siegel is more an adult doctor. He doesn't think about kids. He doesn't even mention his report. Any of the reports and letters and affidavits they throw around. He does not even mention at all the addiction potential of an adolescent brain when they start. Nothing does he mention. And let's take this. So climate change, for example. Here are all the scientists believe it. Here are all the other ones that don't. This is where Dr. Siegel is in this fight, right here, that little number of people. So I'm not trying to discredit his credibility. He has the same goals we do. He would like everybody off cigarettes as well as we do. But his perspective on this is very different than Dr. Winikoff's and mine. And I can supply a rebuttal letter from Dr. Winikoff on this too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to say anything at all on this topic?
Can I just say one more thing? So
Go ahead.
this was written in July of 2019, before we started having all the lung problems. And my understanding is we probably were having problems, pulmonary problems, before this date, but weren't attaching it to e-cigarettes. It's just that suddenly someone said, wow, what are you doing? And the person said, oh, I vape. And suddenly that's how we're now realizing that it's causing pulmonary problems, severe pulmonary problems.
And arterial problems.
So this person says, smokers who plan to stop smoking should still be encouraged to first use FDA-approved therapies rather than e-cigarettes, says Nancy Rigotti, MD, senior author of the paper, and director of MGH Tobacco Research and Treatment Center. So I just wondered today if she would still say the same thing. And she said, this study suggests e-cigarettes may be helpful to some folks, smokers who are not able to quit. So it's not, I don't know, doesn't tell the whole story, if you ask me.
But Fran, didn't you say that Dr. Rigotti said first use
Yes.
approved FDA,
Exactly.
which is not e-cigarettes?
Correct.
It's
And now
patches,
we know that
it's
e-cigarettes
medication.
have their own set of problems.
But what I think you can glean from that is that there is a role for e-cigarettes in the process.
Yeah.
Maybe it may
I'm
not
sure
be
we
the
can.
preferred role for everybody, but in the collection of ammunition to confront the problem, it's one of the devices to use. That's what I think you can glean from the article, and by enacting the regulations you're contemplating, it makes ineffective that one particular approach, and I think that's a bad idea.
All right, I think we've heard from the major players. Sorry,
No, I just have a quick
except for the
question.
board. Go ahead.
Is nicotine gum and patches available over the counter?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a possibility that instead of vaping, kids are gonna buy gum and throw
Kids
patches on
can't buy
themselves?
it over the counter.
So there's a standing order by the commissioner after the ban last week that says, if you go to a pharmacy, that you don't need a prescription by your doctor to get any over-the-counter NRT, to get the copay. So that's if you're 18 years or older. If you're under 18, you could go to your pediatrician to get a prescription. So you need a prescription if you're under 18.
Anything else? Then I think it's worthwhile to declare the public hearing, anyway, adjourned, or, I guess that's the word we use, over. Closed.
You should vote to close the public hearing. Should take a formal vote.
Formally. Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I motion that we close the public hearing.
I second that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. We appreciate your deep interest in this particular topic. It's one we are obviously very invested in, and a lot of activity surrounding us is having an impact on what we are doing here as well. So even including the fact that boards of health are extra responsible apparently for enforcing the governor's ban, because the state doesn't have enough people to go out and scan all the shelves and make sure that those products are no longer there. So it's up to us to be the enforcers in this current ban.
There are 3 enforcers, police department, you, and DPH. So it's not just one, it's 3.
Well, yeah, except they don't have the people to cover 351 cities and towns.
True, true.
So that's where the governor asked
Yep.
us to
Do
get
you know when you
involved.
plan to vote?
We'd hope tonight.
We could vote tonight. The public hearing is closed.
Well,
Is there,
Very few towns go to 3 meetings, in my experience.
Public
And
hearing is closed.
and it's really hard when you do beyond that.
so, I would make a motion that we take out of our regulations, our current regulations, where is the document? Have
You can vote to move to adopt it as written.
Okay, good. So adopted as written means that mint, menthol, and wintergreen flavors will be removed from the current, will be removed so then that they cannot be sold as a flavored they cannot be sold as a flavored product. Before, they were being able to be sold as a flavored product, even though we had banned the sale, restricted the sale of flavored products. So we would include.
so that exemption is gone?
Is going away.
Right.
But I would also suggest that we not make this effective until January 30th, so that if some new information should come up in the meantime, that we could make additional changes.
Is that before or after the governor's ban
The
expires?
governor's ban is the 20, it goes off January 25th of 2020.
Would you mind cleaning up that motion a little bit, since we have a lawyer in the room? And maybe making a motion to remove the exemption from menthol and wintergreen?
Remove the exemption from the
Menthol and wintergreen as
mint,
flavored
menthol.
products.
As flavored products. Right now, they're exempt from
Right now,
flavor.
they're exempt.
Right.
You want, I believe,
We want to remove
your intention is to
the
remove the exemption.
Correct.
I don't want to tell you what to do, though.
No, that's what I thought I was saying. Okay.
Just
Right.
make it a
I
little
think we understand the
cleaner.
intent, and that's a nice articulation of the intent. With the effective date, well, do you want to make the effective date coincide, in fact, with I mean, why'd you pick the 30th?
Just because
It
it
was
was
near.
the end of the month. We
Okay.
picked the 30th, the 1st of August.
Okay.
I just
All
thought
right.
that's what we did as precedent.
All right. So, remove the exemption effective January 30th, 2020. That is the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Further discussion?
I think we've listened to a lot of information, we've read a lot. We've got studies to show that mint and menthol are the preferred flavors that kids use, and that it's, for adults, it's an aesthetic that allows them to smoke more and vape more, and so that's why that's my reason behind it. I have a staff, yeah, reading. It's not.
It's an impressive stick. Let's take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye
So we're voting,
on your motion.
so aye.
Aye. The vote passes 3-0.
Okay.
We're done, folks.
Thank you, because that really sends a message to town when it's unanimous. And is my Quadigera there somewhere?
I think we give it back to you, it's in your
Yeah, you put
pocket.
it-
Check your
Oh, I
pocket,
did.
man.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
I can go back
Thank you.
and relate to politicians. And Sean Dooling, I think is yours, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
Sean Julie,
I
yep.
will tell him. Good night.
Thank you.
It's our next year.
Thank
Good
you.
night. All right, we're a little past 7:30. This time for a variance hearing.
What's that?
Anybody here for Crescent
Yes.
Avenue? Come on down. Before we start, I gotta read a little preamble and then we'll begin our
Sure.
public hearing, okay? So it is approximately 7:45 or so. And we're about to call a variance hearing from Board of Health Regulations to order for 15 Crescent Avenue. It's my duty to inform you, the applicant, that you'll have to provide the board with data to support your request for a waiver of the Board of Health requirements, and that if you don't receive the waiver, it'll do you manifest injustice. You've also got to show that what you intend to do is environmentally acceptable. Floor is yours.
All right.
You are.
For the record, I'm Peter Lyons with Collins Civil Engineering Group, representing the owner of the property. I don't think you guys have the latest set of plans. We made a very minor change today. I can redistribute those.
Where was that again?
Yeah, I do.
The minor change?
9/12/19 now.
We just did it today, so it will be
All right.
10/1. So I have four copies of that I can hand out.
Do you know what the change was on the plan?
I do, it's very simple. I can just show you on this one if you want. I'll give you just a rundown of the project. So it's a septic repair on a existing 3-bedroom home on Crescent Avenue. It's a failed
Could you
septic.
pass down a couple of the, you mentioned?
Yep. So there's 4 copies there.
Probably use 2 here.
And then, I guess if you two want to look at this one.
No, so, can we talk about where the change came first?
Yes, so the change on the new plan that was just distributed, it includes some elevations on the profile for the impervious liner that's around the system. So on the right side of the profile, we show top and bottom elevations on the liner. And we also revised the leader on the plan that says impervious barrier limit. Top of barrier 177.3, bottom of barrier is 172. That's a 5-foot impermeable barrier. Nothing else changed on the project, just those 2 items pertaining to the barrier. What we're doing is refitting the existing 1,500-gallon tank on the rear of the house and running a gravity 4-inch sewer line to the front yard. The whole property slopes from the rear down to the front, with Crescent Avenue being the low point. So with something like this, we're contending with the steep slope of the property without getting into retaining walls or anything. We are required to have more than 36 inches of cover over the leaching area. And unfortunately, the driveway runs through there, so we can't really make the driveway any steeper than it is. There's really no alternatives on the on the left side of the property. We have the water line and overhead electric to contend with. So our only option, while maintaining proper setbacks and avoiding most likely a pump system in the rear, is to put it out in the front yard under the driveway. So what we're proposing is a 12 by 36 leaching bed with low profile flow diffusers. It's all H20 rated to be under the driveway, as well as accommodate the extra cover. that's pretty much it. So I guess I'll
So the variance you're
address any
requesting.
questions.
well,
Yeah, but
Specifying, is the depth, is that the
yep.
major
So
issue?
it's a variance from section 310 CMR 15221 of the state sanitary code, which requires a maximum 36 inches of cover over all septic components. A variance that would allow up to 60 inches of cover is requested. And noted it's for the soil absorption area only, and it is H20 rated. Any questions on it?
Well, let's go to our consultant.
Thank you. There's on the barrier part, you have top barrier 177.3, and it's the bottom barrier elevation 172.3.
Correct.
Not trying to be picky, but.
Yep,
I could
no,
easily-
I
I
understand.
could easily cross that out.
I saw that
Bottom
too, yep.
for you. But the gentleman's right, it's a hill that's, the house is located on a hill that's 26 feet from the bottom to the top. The system in the past was back prior to 1995, as my peer review stated. Back then they had smaller systems, you could use the depth of the leaching area, and this one originally had a pit. So the backyard, to upgrade with today's standards and with the grading on it, may force the homeowner into a pump system and knocking down a lot of trees and stuff. It's a wooded backyard. You can see a retaining wall that from the deck going out, that's like a retaining wall, so it's really hilly. One of the first revisions that came in, they wanted to use a new tank in the back. They wanted to use a plastic tank. But after reading the Title V inspection report, the Title V inspector stated that the tank was sound and structurally okay. So I contacted George Collins and said, George, the tank, the existing tank's okay, you can use it if you want to. You can save the homeowner a lot of money and time, and from preventing putting a plastic tank in the back. And he went ahead with it. That's why you see the existing tank. The existing D-box and the pits in the backyard, they're going to remove it and put it in the front of the house and make it into a gravity system, which is a benefit to the homeowner because it allows gravity fed with no pump system. Down below, they are correct, it's a paved driveway. It's the only way getting up to the house. It's a steep driveway, you gotta drive up, almost, 20 feet, 10, 15 feet up. And they are putting their leaching facility in that location. So in order to keep the driveway at its elevation, flat, so it's actually drivable, and make the house presentable, or actually, you can entrance the front of the house or the garage, you'd have to lower the septic system. And the depth that they picked is a good depth, and it is greater than 3 feet below the ground. Without the driveway, they could have staggered the trenches, going across, staggering it down. There would be no need at all for a variance, but because of that driveway entry into the house, it does create a problem. Title V does allow local boards of health to deal with old houses with old designs, kind of trying to convert it to our new designs, which are flat systems that can breathe or exchange with the atmosphere. It's good for the bacteria and the organics inside the leaching area break down easier. That's why they like it, and it cleans the effluent better. But they do allow it to drop down to 6 feet because of, this is a great example, because of pre-existing homes and people need to have some kind of a break. But in order to that, you have to vent it to the atmosphere, which they do have a vent, and it's vented properly, and the system has to be H20 loading. In this case, it had to be H20 loading anyhow, because there's a driveway there, and for the D-box, it would have to be H20 loading, which they actually have in this revision, which is good. So overall, it's a pretty good plan. It's away from the water service, and that's good. So I recommend approval.
Okay. Just for a layman's translation, H20 means what kind of truck?
H20 means all vehicles, like you might find in a parking lot at the mall. Trailer trucks could go over it. H20 is the heaviest loading we have, and that's what we call it. H10 is your non-traffic size structures. And then you got some structures that will rate it, like infiltrators will rate their structures for like a 1-axle, 2-axle, 3-axle trucks. It kind of goes differently. If you have it on a driveway for like a small part of the driveway, you're just going to back out on it and drive away. they have some of those sturdier, just take temporary vehicle traffic. But H20 is the heaviest you can get.
Okay.
These are precast, 4x8 units, and pretty good. They've been around for a long time. Having this sitting in Beddystone or underneath the driveway is a good pick. A leaching area,
Okay.
leaching facility.
Questions from the board?
I read your report. I just need to understand, the state code provides relief for existing deep elevated systems under repair or upgrade permit applications. The local variance, that's us,
That's you.
grants up to 72 inches, which is the 6 feet. So
Correct,
they're gonna
correct.
just use 5 of those 6 feet.
Correct, yeah, you don't need,
They don't
that's the
need-
maximum.
Okay.
I guess it gets below 6 feet, they probably consider it's not breathing. There's no atmosphere, and then the effluent becomes anaerobic. And that's bacteria living without oxygen versus aerobic bacteria. And you want the aerobic bacteria to break down the phosphates and organics. That's from wastewater from the home. Yeah, it's all a little bit of biology involved with it too.
I'm
which
just
is
thinking
good.
our gut is all anaerobic, so we certainly break down a lot of stuff, but that's okay.
And all your IA systems nowadays are pumping air into the system,
Mhm.
just making it aerobic. That's the trick.
Any concern with the venting being near the neighbors in terms of any odor or problems like that?
You know, the venting is on, the only thing with the venting, I think, well, they could put a charcoal filter on it, which they do actually offer on this one, and a charcoal filter will help with the odors. The vent itself is almost close to 10 feet from the property line. Unfortunately, they could put the venting going on the opposite side of the leaching area and maybe bring it up towards the house, but I don't think it's gonna really make much of a difference. There's a lot of vents in town, and yes, the vents would have some kind of odor to it, but for relief, their charcoal filter would work once they replace it.
Okay. Other discussion? Ready for a motion?
So I make a motion that we accept the variance as requested and as
Okay,
outlined
to
by
grant the variance.
Wade.
Okay.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right then.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, also the deed restriction too, there's no garbage grinder.
That's right, yes, there's a deed restriction mentioned here for no garbage disposal. Is that a separate, do we have to do that
Well,
separately?
we can make another motion.
It's typically in your motion, so when it's asked,
So is what you
wishes.
explained in the variance.
Yes.
See the document.
That's
where
right out of
no
the
garbage
regulations.
grinder. Yes. On the back.
So should there be a second motion then that a suitable document be recorded at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds signifying that no garbage grinders shall be installed or used in the dwelling on the property?
Fran can just amend her initial motion
Okay.
that it be included, garbage grinder restriction be included.
Okay.
I amend my motion that a garbage grinder restriction be included.
Second
I
to that?
second that motion.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. There's that too.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right.
Best to read the whole thing at the end. I'm not gonna cover it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But that garbage grinder restriction is in the regulations too.
This is a pretty tiny lot, 8,000 feet,
Yeah, this is a very small one, yes.
and the house was built in '88?
Yes. But pits were good. Look at, you can see a little dotted line, a little pit, it's a 6x6 pit, and the volume in that was enough.
So it was just a grandfathered lot? Because, I mean, that's
Oh,
way
grand-
below 30,000.
Oh, but for the nitrogen loading, you mean? That started in 1989.
Well, R1 zoning. I
Oh,
mean-
your zoning, oh, you have to talk to Mr. Bullock on that. Yeah.
No.
I mean, because zoning can go with generations.
Well, but
It's
also,
like-
I mean, besides that, I mean, we were actually accused once upon a time of rewriting the zoning laws by actually putting in the nitrate loadings. But even with the nitrate loading, On 8,000 feet, how many?
Pre-existing three-bedroom,
Yeah.
pre-existing. It's like a grandfather right.
Good evening.
Hi, Rich.
Well, sorry we're a little bit late getting to you. Glad you're here.
That's I don't have any material to give you.
We can just talk.
Yeah,
Are they gonna make,
that's what,
little change on the plan?
I intended to do.
Oh, they can make,
Um,
okay.
I know there are some people upstairs.
Oh, the upstairs now on the same issue upstairs?
No, it's separate. I think
What happened to
it's,
Sandy? She was here and she went.
there's something upstairs on the agenda that, I think. Now, some people might be interested in the B1 discussion, but I know there are others that are probably interested in two discussions.
All right, well, let's take it one at a time.
All right, so we can at least maybe start on the B1 and.
Okay.
So, as you know, we've had working on a B1 study for the Norfolk Center, looking at the zoning regulations that are in place, as well as, zoning bylaws, as well as regulations related to stormwater and wastewater, as in the overall picture of town center and possible outcomes of development in relation to the master plan that the town has, as well as the housing production plan. And we started, originally the representative from this board was Jeff Kane. He had started, and then subsequently he left. Well, he no longer ran as a member. I think Fran popped in there for a meeting or two to fill in, and Eileen's been the representative to the board as of lately. So we started in earnest around January, and we've had several community meetings. We had some online surveying done. We have B1 subcommittee meetings, and so we're working our way towards the end of the study. And some things that we've been discussing is, one is relation to the zoning changes, but then, the topic of wastewater is one of the things that's been part of the discussion relative to downtown as overall development, not related to zoning, but in relation to potential outcomes with development. And so, wanted to just talk about that a little bit, but some of the things we had, last community meeting was September 12th. If you hadn't had a chance to, you could rewatch it on TV if you want. We had some good feedback from the residents. On September 23rd, we had which wasn't that long ago, we had a meeting with the planning board to discuss some of the recommended areas that MAPC, so Metropolitan Area Planning Council, was working with us. There's a planner there, Josh Fiala. And we range of topics were, right now, relative to heights of buildings, setbacks of buildings, parking, buffer zone requirements. Right now in the zoning, there is an artificial cap on development in relation to bedrooms. We talked about that as well. And so we went down the range of different things. And so we had put together some recommendations, worked on the zoning with the planning board to move it to the warrant for discussion. Move it on to warrant to hopefully move to November 19th to have put before town meeting. And so from September 23rd, I know there has been I've seen some of the feedback relative to some of the proposed changes at least on Facebook, and then people have called and stopped in and so forth relative to some of the proposed changes. And I think, one of the arching themes is, yes, we would like to have development in Norfolk Center, but really, shape and size and scale and mass and all those different those are kind of threads that kind of weave into that discussion a little bit. At least when we started on September 23rd, one of the things we can say, actually we did this September 12th, I think there's there is a project, and I forget the name, in Walpole Center, that clearly was kind of that charging point of, listen, this is not what we want to have in Norfolk Center. You know, we're either driving by, or we're on the train, we're going by, we see it. That's not the right fit for Norfolk Center. So fortunately enough, we had renderings of that, and that's not what the outcome of the zoning study is going to propose, because well, one, it's a 5-story building, so we're not even going that high as far as recommending heights of that nature. Nor, that building is also on municipal wastewater in Walpole Center, so the actual density that you can produce there is not apples to apples compared to Norfolk Center. There is a wastewater treatment plant that's in Norfolk Center, but if you take all that capacity together, it's 30,000 gallons a day. So, and that's shared amongst several different properties. So, you know, the reality is that wasn't really something that could come out of it, but nevertheless, we tried to address that. But one of the issues going through this whole planning process, we met with property owners on development sites, and the feedback that we got was, while the zoning works on a smaller scale for smaller sites, as you try to apply the economics on larger sites, whether it's a vacant piece of land or a site where you have a building, you want to take it down and redevelop it, you know, the density kind of plays into the economics of making that all work. So one of the things that they mentioned, at least coming here, I spoke to Wayne a little bit ahead of time, is the issue of your regs related to the garbage grinder. So the garbage grinder is not optional in new construction. You know, you have to design for it. So one of the things to give consideration to is, if you don't have a garbage grinder, as you just discussed now, and that's related to repair situations, they have to have a deed restriction that you can't have a garbage grinder. And my understanding, but that's a requirement you can do under Title V. So designing a system for the garbage grinder is not optional. So you have to, under the current regulations. So one of the criticisms or critiques of our existing regulatory system is that that's potential barrier. When you add on putting the building on the property, when you have to put the stormwater on site, because that's part of our regulations as well, everything's got to be on site, and you have setbacks and so forth, then the puzzle gets a little bit more complicated. So that was one of the comments that we received. Because we are trying to encourage mixed use, so we've got a residential component of wastewater, and then we've got a commercial component. So.
All right, so this is not, I was thinking commercial, why would that have a big problem with garbage grinders? But you're actually trying to get like downstairs, commercial, upstairs,
Correct,
residential, that kind of
right.
thing?
Yeah, so when you look at, citing the system for the commercial end of it, and then you add on the residential, when you layer them, then it starts to get a little bit trickier as far as land. I guess and one of the better examples of it is Dunkin' Donuts in Town Center. They had, I think when I first started here, I think they were they might have been before that, but I know they had filed with the planning board to where the green, where the grass is now, where they sell the Christmas trees and so forth, right next door, that's their property. So they had considered putting up a new building there and then doing renovations to the existing Dunkin' Donuts, and then building a new septic system that's going to comply with new Title V requirements. And the puzzle got a little bit tricky because they were trying to put a system on there while maintaining Dunkin' Donuts and not shut it down. They wanted to set something up so they can keep that operational and transition over. At the same time, the site layout with the drive-through and trying to rearrange the drive-through and not have it come around the front of the building and then come out, was getting the planning board, and the overall site design was having challenges. So it started to bring the idea of, well, this is going a little bit off track, we'll get you back on track. It's like if we had sewer available to us, then trying to site all these things on the property would make it a lot easier where we could just, tie into municipal sewer and then the septic system no longer, requirements are an issue. So having heard that from them and kind of felt a real example of a development trying to have, one existing building, which they weren't planning on raising that building, and then build a new building, which would have been commercial on the first floor, 8 apartments above, and they were looking to try to put in a full-serve restaurant on the first floor. Because, I think it's been pretty well understood. I think there's a demand for that in Norfolk Center, and there's been a need for that from a market standpoint. I think residents would like to see something of that variety. So when you try to put all those pieces together, they were challenged by that. So what we have done on a parallel track, if you will, is we have applied to Department of Housing and Community Development to look at the existing wastewater treatment plant and potentially expanding it, and then expand it to the B1 area. But there's a whole set of criteria that you gotta deal with, obviously with the DEP, the plan, et cetera, et cetera. So the likely outcome of getting that done, it's kind of a longer range idea, and there's complications with trying to do that because that wastewater treatment plant was not a municipal plant, it became a municipal plant, so all the share of the wastewater is by different properties. And again, it's back to 30,000 gallons, so it's not a large flow that we're talking about overall. And the fact that the way the DEP regs, or at least I think it's regs, but if you want to try to take unused capacity, you have to have users into the system to demonstrate that the system can handle it. And the only users that we have are the condos, and then we have, Silla's, the therapy center, and Walgreens. They're actually, sending wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant. So we're kind of balancing that, and then we look to, so we're in 2 different areas, so to speak, and one is the wastewater as it relates to the local Board of Health regulations. So I'm here to talk about that a little bit. I'm not asking for anything, I'm just kind of give you some more information relative to that. But I can say that we did do an analysis on, and I can work with Josh, that I can forward you for 194 Main Street. So 194 Main Street is where Bork's restaurant is, and there's a little plaza. And the owner of that property had approached the town on 2 different, at least 2, maybe 3 different occasions to try to redevelop under the existing zoning bylaws for the town of Norfolk. And they said, look, the way the bylaws are written, it's not, I can't really do it. I know you would like me to just tear this all down and do X, Y, and Z, but it also has to make sense financially, understood? Because the development that we want to see in Norfolk Center, it's being done by private investors and property owners. This is not, this is not the town of Norfolk trying to say, we're not saying you do this on this property and so forth. So that was one of the things that came up at the community meeting. And I think there was thinking that we're going to do all this building. It's not. We're trying to encourage, incentivize private investment. But anyway, so his discussion was, hey, listen, the Board of Health regulations are, have an impact on me on redeveloping my property. So just to play that out a little bit for you, so he has a 40B, as you know, they can apply for waivers on the local Board of Health regulations, as far as the design criteria goes. And then you have the 10,000 gallons a day, right, that maximum flow, and then you get above that, you get into a wastewater treatment plant. So the economics of, 10,000 gallons of flow a day below and then above, then there's a scaling of, well, if I get into a wastewater treatment plant, then my development portfolio is probably gonna be a lot larger to finance a wastewater treatment plant. So thinking of 10,000 gallon, then spreading it back down on how you do a development. So that property is 2.75 acres, 194 Main Street. And under the zone, under 40B, he originally came in with 72 apartments for 55 and over. No commercial, just outright apartments. So that gives you a sense of at least kind of the high-end cap of how much density you can get out of a site per se. Because you've got 10,000 gallon, you distribute under 40B, you have to have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Under mass housing, you have to have 10% of the total number of units, the 3 bedrooms. So 72, take 10%, you got 7 units there of 3 bedroom, and then there's a variety of 1 and 2 bedroom units.
But all of those apartments go toward the 40B commitment that we have
Yeah,
as a
they
town of
do,
Norfolk.
they do, that's kind of a separate thing, but yes, they do all count as far as the overall 40B inventory goes. What the ZBA had asked them and said, listen, would you consider make them non-age restricted? Because we think there is a need for non-age restricted apartments in town for a variety of different reasons. You know, there's people downsizing, there's people that are coming out on their own and they would like to rent in Norfolk, and they don't want to necessarily buy a home yet. They want to have a part of the town investment in themselves and then decide they want to live here. And then there's younger folks that have grown up in town that are maybe like to live in town. They don't want to buy a house, but they don't want to, you know, they don't make that full investment, so they're either outside of town renting or they're in, you know, so they're not in town. That's not available to them. Now, by doing that, the design criteria for non-age restricted goes up under Title V, so the number of units drops down to 60. So it's no longer 72, so we're down to 60 to distribute the 10,000 gallons a day. So what we're trying to do is not say this rezoning in Norfolk Center is going to replace 40B. That's not the intent of it. The intent of it is to try to have some of the mixed-use development that we want to have in Norfolk Center and have people choose that as an option for development, as opposed to saying, under your local zoning, add all the regulatory requirements together. I don't want to go down that way. I want to go 40B. And we've seen that a couple of times in town center already. 194 Main, and then Boyd's Crossing was another one that ended up going the route of 40B. And it's not really, some people may use it as a scare tactic, but then there's a practical side of it as we look at the regulations where you see things might point somebody in that direction. It's not necessarily a threat. Some people may threaten that, but not all of them are in that same boat, so we kind of look at that. So the zoning, what we're trying to do is create a balance where it's mixed use, so we have commercial and residential, and strike a balance. So I haven't shared this out more than this at the moment, but we've gone back, and I've heard the residents' fear, concern, and, you know, of this density and what you're doing. So we're looking to make some additional adjustments, which I'm gonna share with the planning board before next Tuesday, but discuss it again, and it might go on to town meeting or not, which will scale it down a little bit more from even what you heard last Monday. And actually, the planning board doesn't even know this because it's kind of fresh, so I'm here tonight. So one of the issues was height. So we talked about height in relation to going to 3.5 stories. It's 3 right now. And when we did some of those preferencing as far as height, you know, there was that 3 to 4 story. We have, if you can go back and look at some of the findings from people. So what we're saying, we're going to revise it, and we'll stay with 3-story. But the way the zoning is right now, at least is a recommendation. We'll see what happens in the end next Tuesday. I can't predict this, but we're going to go revise the recommendation to go 3-story. Forget about that half-story. So it's 3 stories, 46 feet. Right now, you can go 46 feet by special permit, and by letting somebody have a little bit higher roof is not really against or counter what people will want to see in town. They want to see roofs. They don't want to see flat buildings, okay? So if you want to see pitched roofs, then that's where we want to direct the requirements to, and not require somebody to put a special permit. That's really what we want. Why subject? So that's a modified change. This all doesn't affect you as the Board of Health. I'm just going through some of the recommendations. Parking was one thing that came up. We were going to 1 Right now, the bylaw is 1.5. There's good research and data to say when you put this kind of mixed-use development in town centers, with, especially next to mass transit, that one can work per dwelling unit, because you have a combination of commercial using the parking during the day and the residents using the parking at nighttime, and there's that mixing. So it wasn't, we were gonna lower it to 1. If you need more parking, you put in more parking. So it's not like, you know, nevertheless, I saw a lot of the feedback, so we're gonna just keep it the same. So we'll keep 1.5. We're not gonna change that.
So that's still a requirement, keeping it at 1.5.
Yeah, so there's no change.
So there wasn't gonna be one the requirement and 1.5.
No,
Or
so
you could build whatever
it would have
parking
been
you
1 if we revised it,
Right.
instead of 1.5 for mixed use. It's gonna be, we're gonna keep it the same status
But the,
quo.
When you
but
say
the
mixed-
one would permit, I'm sorry, the
I'm
one
sorry.
would permit a larger building perhaps, and better investment from the builder because they can build a larger building as opposed to more parking.
Correct.
That was the
Correct.
theory behind it.
That was the theory. Now,
Can I visualize what this mix looks like? Is it?
next door, 18 Union Street.
So bank on the bottom, apartments up top.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
The parking isn't underneath? I thought I saw.
No, next door?
No, with the
No.
40.
Well, the 40, yeah, not 100% apples to apples, because that is under. It's really what you call under. It's at grade in the back of the site, and then they're building up from the grade down, because it drops off, you know, next to the railroad bed, so then they're coming up.
But for the residents, it's important in the wintertime, because they have.
Yeah, that's a
covered
huge,
garage.
right, so that's a huge amenity for them, right, so that's a good thing, but as far as the parking requirement, we're keeping it at 1.5, so we're not gonna make a change to that. And then there was an issue of, again, trying to be flexible in design as far as a ratio, no ratio between residential and commercial. So we're gonna back into that and put some ratios in there. So having said all that, what it ends up being is, I'll just tell you that if we apply the new standards, we figured that property across the street would generate 44 units, and we didn't specify bedrooms necessarily in the way we're looking at it, and then roughly 4,800 square feet of commercial. So that same site, under these potential change zonings, that could be an outcome if it was a mixed-use building.
What is it compared to the commercial space now?
So if that goes through, there's 0 commercial space, because it's all residential.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I
Right.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, so in a theoretical world, you can do commercial and 40B together, but it's extremely complicated and not too many have done it. So the notion of kind of marrying 40B and mixed use together really doesn't seem to pan out like in a building like that. You end up going just all straight residential when they do 40B. So, you know, again, now the other thing that was brought up was, so we do have inclusionary bylaws, so at least 10% of it still will be affordable. It's, as part of our bylaw. So that's still there. So essentially from a number standpoint, 40 units, you get 10% equalizer, you know, you stay the same, you know, so it doesn't, so those are some of the changes that we're looking at. But the issue of, could there potential to be, like, listen, if you're gonna deed restrict new construction and not have garbage grinders, is that potentially possible? So I just throw that out to you, I'm not asking for anything, but that's something that has come up.
Do the new apartments next door have garbage grinders?
I'm pretty sure they have them. Well, I don't know if they have them, but they designed for it. Yeah.
And another kind of random question, so the strip mall that has the dry cleaner and the Norfolk Food Mart or whatever it is
Mhm.
next to Daly's Garage, there's been empty spaces in there for quite some time.
Mhm.
What are those properties lacking in terms of ability to put like a coffee shop or something in with bathrooms that they may not be able to do under their wastewater issues at this time?
Yeah, so they had come to a property owner meeting that we hosted earlier in this year, and they feel that the sewer is more of a need for them because of the existing building to try to unlock it, because they did have a system, as I understand, was approved a while ago, I think, if I recall, for a system there, but the cost of the system and trying to do the new system and get somebody in there, it didn't tip the scale to make anything happen, so what I'm talking about as far as your local regulations, that probably, if that were to happen like that, I don't know if that would help them or not, I really haven't talked to them about that.
It just seems we're trying to encourage more business in town, trying to encourage more business that already exists in spaces that we could potentially fill up. It makes sense.
Yeah. Now, that's an interesting one because it's an existing building, but then, but the new, I'll look to you, you don't have to give an answer today,
Oh,
but.
please.
But if they did mixed use, see, that would be the new portion of the building, so if they essentially, and haven't got into that build, we don't know if that building can handle to build on top of it or not from a structural standpoint, or if it makes sense or not, but just say hypothetically, it can, and they wanted to build up some residential above it, that would be new construction, right, that portion of it, or how would you think that would be treated?
Are we, what side?
So it's the building,
Right by the railroad tracks?
yeah,
Across the
on
street
Rock,
from?
yeah, from the bank.
No, not from the bank, from the,
Santander.
Well, Santander, then, yeah.
it's right.
Norfolk Food Mart building.
Norfolk Food Mart.
Next to Daly's Garage.
Okay, got it. Oh, that strip, that little strip mall right
Yes,
there?
that is-
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Like
right
permanently
across from
empty
the-
space, because
Right.
I'm not
The
sure.
transit, the
Right.
T, that's how I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, it's all commercial, when you got a dry cleaners,
Right.
you had a convenience store, then an empty store.
So if they wanted to add residential to the top,
Yeah, it's a really tight lot. That's,
Yeah.
that's, I think.
And
more-
even if they didn't want to add residential, I was saying that right now, the commercial space, depending on what you want to put in there, wouldn't be able to be supported by the wastewater system that's
But-
there now.
But there is, that thing, right now, there was a design approved, it was actually a really good design for a dry cleaners, a little small coffee shop, and a takeout Chinese food place, and somehow it didn't go through. And a lady who owns the coffee shop next door paid for it all, because she wanted to be a tenant in there, so there was a lot of work done. GLM Engineering did the design for it.
Didn't go through,
Didn't go through the owner to put it in.
Oh, okay.
Because the permit was sitting there. And they have to, they can get a permit, but they need to install it. They need a permit, like anybody.
so that's kind of where it gets into the back mechanics of it.
But I have a couple of questions. When you
Sure.
talked about a sewer plant coming into town, right, from a line coming down from the sewer plant, that wouldn't be involved with any kind of garbage grinder design requirement, because that would be under a whole different type
Right,
of design
right,
requirement.
right.
But you go with Title V, on-site septic system, new
Right.
construction, you add on any wastewater to the original design, that's considered new construction.
Yeah.
And,
That-
and so you wanna look, local regulations are kinda tough, this topic here is a topic I get a lot. I hear a lot from different developers and homeowners and just people in general of the garbage grinder requirement. I had the privilege and the honor to revise the last on-site septic system regulations for this town. And Tom was part of it. And during that review, we had a public review, we had people, I gave out a draft to a lot of different individuals and professionals and people who worked in different boards for their comments. And when we came down to a public meeting, I looked at the board, there's two different people, of course, said, what do you guys think about the garbage grinder? You still want it in your regulations? And there was kind of like evolution, either one way or the other way, and they all said they wanted the garbage grinder regulation to continue. So that was one attempt of removing the garbage grinder regulation or keeping it.
Is that what you were attempting to do?
No,
It
no,
made
no.
no sense.
Oh, no, because it was big. It was a big thing, because you take a look at the garbage grinder requirement in itself. I'm not sure if you guys
it
understand.
adds
Well,
50%
it's
onto the.
50%, it's
Well,
110 becomes 165.
No, well, it requires more leaching area because the garbage grinder, when you use it, you put a lot of particles into organics into the system, so they want it bigger so it'll last longer. And the tanks are also divided into two halves, so it says so hydraulic detention time in the tank goes through two different compartments where a non-septic design, a septic design without the garbage grinder is only a single tank. So it's also the tank size, the different tank too. And what you're asking the designers for is to design for garbage grinders. That's why it's bigger and it's required. And some people feel that they shouldn't be able to, it should be a designer's choice. The designer should choose what he wants to put in there, or the homeowner. I personally think the garbage grinder requirement should be another turnaround. One thing, you don't want garbage grinders on on-site septic systems. It's really, you want to discourage it as much as possible. For anybody in that line of work would say, why would you want to put more solids into a septic system and clog up your field? But the town has one that required, designed to have it, so you have it, go down to Home Depot and put one in. So you're encouraging that use, which isn't always the best thing. Personally, I think that the garbage grinder regulation designs through Title V is inadequate. I think they should also increase the tank size by 50% too, because the hydraulic part, the settling part, all the solids going into the tank to separate the solids and the grease, and so the gray water goes out to the field. It's more of a clearer, less, more particles aren't in the effluent, and the field will last longer. Is there really need for a garbage grinder? Is the board making designers include garbage grinders so you're wearing your belt and suspenders also at the same time? Because someone might run down to Home Depot and put a garbage grinder in. If they did put a garbage grinder in and the system wasn't designed for one, what would happen? It would probably prematurely fail. Would that upset the community with diseases and bad health? Probably not, but it'd be a real bad move for that individual who decided to put a garbage grinder in without the design appropriately for it. But in our original thought of why the garbage grinder is in new construction, I don't know. I wasn't there. It was my predecessor, and I think that regulation came into effect almost 25 years ago. So you've seen that regulation through generations. And I was talking to an engineer and a resident this week about garbage grinders, and I told him the biggest thing is you have to, people are used to this. It's part of the norm. And
Not in my house.
Not yours, but typically, you got a regulation for 25
We
years.
have one.
I see.
We have one, so when we lived on the other side of Norfolk, we didn't have one, and we scraped everything, and my parents, we didn't have one, so I scraped everything in the trash, or the dog ditch, right,
Yeah.
one of the two. But we have one now, and I still don't use it, because I'm just used to scraping it all into the trash.
Okay, well, that's good. I have compost too. I have 3 compost piles in my backyard, so I do compost too. I don't think garbage grinders are a good thing. But it's coming down what Rich is saying, but it's in the design. Even though you have one, you don't use it, it's in the design. So if someone comes into town to do new construction, they have to design for that garbage grinder, 50% increase, no matter what. Even if there's someone like yourself buying it, they are forced to have that extra design, extra expense, excavation, extra using the land for that.
I've spoken to a builder in town who has indicated to me that he thinks that's inappropriate, and it's something that we should revisit.
To take a look at. So you can look at, it's part of Title V. It's part of the, if you want to use a garbage grinder, increase it. If you don't want to use a garbage grinder, we have our regular standards, which the repair.
Our Title V or the state Title V?
Okay, the local regulations
The local.
require the garbage grinder on all new construction. The state regulations, designer decides to put a garbage grinder in it, they have the requirements for you to go through that motion, increasing the leaching area.
Increase.
In the local regulations, if you go for a garbage grinder design, you take the state standards and you just put it into the calculation.
So how could we change our,
Okay, so if you decided to do that, I'm not sure, I'm just like, you would do a revision on your existing local regulation. You would take that part out. You omit it.
So it's the option of the builder to either put it in or not. If you put it in, you gotta go back to building the bigger system, and if you don't put it in, you can build a smaller system.
Correct, but I would also, since you have local regulation, you're talking to a regulator here, right? I would say if you happen to take out garbage grinders in new construction and make it a designer's choice, homeowner's choice, or the builder's choice, the same thing, then I would recommend if they do decide to put a garbage grinder in, also have the tank to be increased too.
Yeah.
As well as a leaching facility, so this is more settlement time, and that would protect the system itself.
Now, if it was modify the regulation, does Title V require that deed restriction?
No, not at all.
So you could modify the regulations to have the deed
Oh,
restriction? in
well, the
that?
deed restriction would go away.
Well, unless you put it back in.
Unless, Well, the deed restriction, if you,
So if you don't have a garbage grinder,
wait, the new, well, if you change the regulations, like you said, you took the garbage grinder requirement out of the local regulations, so it's a designer's choice or owner's choice, then if they came in with a plan, new construction, without the garbage grinder design in it, if we signed off, then they wouldn't do anything to their deed restriction, there wouldn't be no need for it. You have an approved Title V local regulation system, there would be no need for it, that would be eliminated. Now, Title V does require deed restrictions on certain IA systems, innovative alternative systems. If you put them in, you have to notify through deed restriction that you have, that house is operating on a certain system, like the Presby system and the Elgin system, et cetera, et cetera. There are deed restrictions in Title V, but there would be no deed restriction requirement for lacking a garbage grinder in the design. If the board changed the regulations, now you have to, because that's what you guys require.
so let me ask you this, I know that, so in the case of the local regulations, you're required, so there's a deed restriction about no garbage grinder in this,
What you saw tonight.
so could you just,
And now for new construction, asking for a deed,
Yeah.
designing without a garbage grinder for new construction, that's going a whole new world, because then if you do it to one, everybody else is gonna want it also. So if you're gonna do it to one, you have to have a really good reason why you're allowing them to design without a garbage grinder, because the next guy is gonna wanna have it too, because there's a lot of cost factors involved in it. I mean, their lots, the zoning requires your lots to be a certain sizes, so they're not gonna get a bigger lot, but they won't have to build a bigger system. And if you multiply it by 30, 40, whatever times, it gets expensive.
I guess the question I was asking is, can you,
So if you go for advanced and new construction, yeah, that's usually it's unfair.
well, no, can you just put a regulation, so,
Well, just say, let the town have its, have like a zoning, B1 zoning will gets exempts from this particular regulation.
no, not if you,
Again, that's not, and I just warn the board, if that goes that way, you want consistency throughout the whole community, because we work with the community itself, so the guy living way up here should be treated the same way as the guy living down here. If the guy's building a single home here, and this guy's building in the town, they should be treated the same. So if you make a regulation, it's going to be town-wide, other than just spot.
what I was
spot
asking about is,
regulation.
if the deed restriction was used, so you're not designing for, I mean, I know it's overkill, perhaps you can't even do this, but if you're taking away the, you don't have to design for a garbage grinder, you're back to Title V, could you have the regulation that you have to deed restrict that there's not a garbage grinder so it's on record? So somebody doesn't swap out, at least it's recorded at the registry, you don't, if you swap it out, it's on you?
You could do that if you wanted to. You might just, it's new, it's a new thought, so.
Yeah,
once
just,
everybody-
give us some thought, I mean.
But over time, it's.
Well, there's an advantage. Of course, the thing that we always assume is that somebody's gonna check the deed. And when, building permits get issued with nobody checking deeds, guess what? Then things happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's the restrictions for bedroom counts, and you go back years later, and it changes,
No.
people see
Yeah.
things.
I think it's, and I get the Home Depot example, and that obviously makes sense, but I think what we're talking about in this case, which, again, just a general conversation, not what this would be regulatory wise, is these would be, apartments within the building that they're a renter, they're not an owner, so they have leases, and so modify an apartment to put a garbage grinder in would require some plumbing changes. It wasn't designed with a grinder in from the original construction. So is it, I don't know if it's apples to, like, in my home, go and stick a garbage grinder in to circumvent,
Well, hey, I've got a larger question, and then maybe we need to find out what these folks in the back here want to talk about. But the larger question actually was, because of this sort of incompatibility between garbage grinders and septic systems, why not simply say, what we really need to think about is more off-site or packaged treatment plants where we move away. If there's a demand for garbage grinders, fine, we can meet it, but let's not meet it with a septic tank. Let's meet it with a sewage system that can handle it. Because right now, the real worry is that these are not that compatible. Those particulates, that organic matter is getting into the field, it's going to impact the life expectancy of the field.
But isn't that the homeowner's problem, or the builder's problem?
Well, sure, but it's a predictable one, so you're almost guaranteeing to the homeowner this is gonna happen. Why not design something that you know won't happen by actually trying a whole different approach to the way we handle wastewater? Like up at the top of the hill, do we need to be thinking about more of those? As we think about building out some of these,
Well, the permits, well, there's gallons per day discharge that requires larger plants that you're talking about.
well, 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah.
And so that's a cost factor, and it's also in the ownerships. So it'd be the developer, if he wants to develop a certain subdivision that exceeds 10,000 gallons per day, you can actually build a treatment plant to serve it, or you can go individual on-site septic systems.
Except that we have that in the subdivision that I live in now, and we had to take Pulte to court because they undersized their wastewater treatment facility, and we had to redo the entire thing for the 80 homes that are living there now. And it kind of, and so our HOA fees, were exorbitant, we kept having to shove in thousands of dollars to take care of upgrading this wastewater treatment plant that didn't work. And somebody approved that, because it didn't rent them, but we get half of Norfolk and half of Rentham in that community.
Yeah, there's treatment plants have bedroom limitations. And the one that you're talking about, I think each house is 4 bedrooms. And then you also have extra flow too for these stables. And once you have a treatment plant running and operating with and your discharge permit gives you exact number of bedrooms or gallons per day, you can divide it by 110, is that you have a board. And the board overviews the treatment plant and optical and the residents. And that treatment plant isn't fully built out, or this extra reserve area, because the stables hasn't been built out and not all the buildings have been put into that treatment plant. So there is some reserve gallons per day in it. And if anybody wants to exceed their 4 bedrooms, they would need to go to the board that runs it and talk to their engineering consultant, probably talk to the town, and then it would be the board's decision to increase the flow going in there, because now it's individually owned. But if you exceed that gallons per day, the state would be very upset. They would ask you to lower it. And they wouldn't find out until because they monitor the discharge monthly, and if you exceeded your gallons per day, something's going on, and they investigate. So you have to monitor yourself. You just can't go crazy and start building, and letting people build buildings all over the place.
No, again, it's an established subdivision with
Yeah.
4 bedrooms. Nobody's doing any extra building. It was the original size of the waste treatment plant that couldn't handle the buildings that were already there.
Oh, I think there's more going on with equipment in there. And
Yes, it's been a problem.
Changing over, yeah, and the membranes shouldn't have been failing as quickly as it did, like 2 years, it should have been a lot
Right.
longer. Yeah, and someone went in there and started removing alarms, and they shouldn't have been removed it, and warranties started disappearing and stuff, yeah, you're dealing with human involvement, other than design involvement.
So as I started, just to sum it up, and then it's just
But-
food for thought.
Problems, bingo, problems.
Right. So what I started was that trying to think about a density that is scalable to town centers. So that's kind of the push and pull here. So we start talking about wastewater treatment plants, and then the scale, economy of scale, to get that density, then there's concern from the community. I think how much now are we gonna oversaturate town centers? So the notion of trying to scale something that fits in town center and look at this one, right? There's other pieces that we're looking at. Is there a way to kind of balance it off? So that's the reason why I'm here. It's just not asking you to do anything tonight, but just kind of talk to you about some of the findings that we've had along the way, and just give you a very current example of a piece of property that I know at least the owner was trying to do something. There was definitely issues related to zoning. There's no question about it. But there's a wastewater piece of this too. So that was all I have for tonight. So
Okay.
and then
Can I just ask Lee one question?
Sure, then we'll find out what the folks want.
Okay, so is every garbage disposal the same as every garbage disposal, or is new technology, do we care about the size of the product that is put into the septic tank, or So I'm thinking if I buy a Bosch garbage disposal as opposed to a, I don't know, run-of-the-mill, I don't know, Home Depot, and does it make a difference?
No, it's not the garbage grinder, it's the stuff that goes through the garbage grinder.
So it's not the particle size?
Well, no, because it sits in the tank. It adds more particles into your tank, more solids into your tank.
Okay.
Because you got a garbage grinder, so you can start using it.
Well, it's interesting that our
I was
dishwashers
gonna say,
actually
exactly,
have
dishwasher,
a
run a dishwasher.
disposal in them.
Yeah,
Is that,
Yeah, there's a little blade in
Right,
dishwashers,
right.
and it takes all the residue and stuff,
Yeah, so-
blows it out there. Very similar, but typically, as I tell my wife, the dishwasher is a washer, it's not a scrubber and rinser, so you have to wash it, rinse your dishes.
But
before
you
put it in
don't.
there.
If you
Well,
buy a
see, if you
good
live with me, I
dishwasher,
tell
you don't.
You gotta rinse, you gotta rinse it. It's
All
not
right,
a scrubber, it's a washer.
And the
Domestic disputes aside here,
So can I at least say this, is a potential consideration to look at the regulation? If I walk out tonight, I'll at least have that, you think
Yes.
about it.
well, it's been a while since we've had a conversation at all on this topic, so
Okay.
it is time to
About the
revisit. I think
grinders.
that's,
You were just grinding through the top.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that what we're talking
Uh,
about?
No, I'm talking about the grinders, yeah.
Grinders,
Yeah.
I
okay.
know it's a, grinding
Well,
topic,
it's,
but.
it's come up, and
Yeah.
let's take another look at it. I think that's worth it.
By the way, I do scrape off before I put mine
Well,
in
you
the
don't have
dishwasher,
to.
okay? Just for the
Yeah.
record.
Actually, Consumer Report says
Right.
it's a bad idea to rinse them because the new machines actually
Yeah, I know.
see the dirt and,
Well.
adjust themselves in washing.
Yeah, we all have our, I know what these folks are here for, so.
Yeah,
Well, there's
so-
also
all right.
this comment that, 25% of the stuff that we burn, we don't have to burn. So if you're just putting it into your trash, I know we talk about compost piles, but some people are putting it into their trash and it's getting burned. Well, now we've got all this air pollution, so I'm
It's
not
getting-
sure
it's
I'd
getting
rather.
burnt? What do you mean?
Well, if you put it into your trash, it's getting burnt. It doesn't
Oh,
go into
oh, oh, oh.
landfills anymore.
Energy,
It doesn't need.
waste of energy, you make electricity.
Well, no, they're not, I'm talking about CO2 in
environment,
the
yeah.
environment, because that's what we're doing with.
All right.
So there's a whole,
I know, it's very
All
complicated.
right, let's close this up and say, yes, we're interested.
Yeah.
All right, good.
All right.
That's
Yeah,
like.
I think that's the best way we can leave it.
All right.
Thank you, Rich, for coming by.
is he
All right,
gonna
And
leave?
maybe we ought to listen town. We have our neighbors from Lawrence Street, and who else is here tonight?
Been a while.
Yeah.
We're all Lawrence.
They're all shy. I always
This
try to
is all
get
Lawrence
down
Street here?
front, get on
So
camera.
you're the front, they're in the back.
How you doing? Dave Diamond,
He's our
3 Brett's
leader.
Farm Road.
What's on your
So,
mind?
so can I sit down here? So,
Yeah.
Okay. So the last meeting I was at, Rich, maybe you can stick around. There was a discussion about working with the developer, for Abbeville on cleanup. And I think, Tom, you said, hey, you work with a lot of developers, this is a good guy to work with, and Rich, you had talked quite a bit about the opportunity to take care of this. Tomorrow night, there'll be a discussion about whether the developer will develop just on the LaRusso property. But there's still an option for him to keep the door open to the Mann property. And, as we know of recently, the Mann family has signed, or the Mann Corporation has signed the financial ineligibility cleanup. So I just want to throw that out there. You've got a group of people who've got a real interest in this. It's not a 40B interest. I mean, there's several factions, I've told you that before, of interests here. But sincerely, what we'd want to do is to work with the Board of Health to get this at the EPA level, because I don't believe we need to work with the developer. The DEP has kind of quiesced on this, and we've got PCBs within a foot of even a Mill River that even in August is within a foot of these PCBs. Very rare kind of form of PCBs. Last time I spoke with you, you asked, where's the data? I said, it's an enclave, it's kind of wrapped up somewhere we can't get it. We've got some of the data, but not all of it's put out there. I don't know if you're limited by the property owner as far as access to the land, but you do have a well, you have downgraded property with test wells on it. So I guess I just wanted to get kind of the open mic here to say, how can we work together on that? What's the jurisdiction? Because I believe in the ZBA tomorrow night, the door will close to be a separate project. Hopefully they will start from scratch, because everything would change. But if it doesn't, we still have Abbeville, all the other work that was done. I know you've written messages to, letters to that board and jurisdictions around. We have an LSP, I have an LSP. So just, if you can give us some guidance, or at least take it under consideration of how to work, it would be helpful. Anything I missed? I mean, we have other things, we want
Well,
chain
we
link
also-
fences up and protection of the, just think there's some general things that should be done, but I think the first thing is an overture of how do we work with the Board of Health?
And the Bush Pond signage.
Yeah. But, we're a group, we're organized, we're petitioners, and Sandy, there is no petition process unless it's development, correct?
The PIP process, the PIP designation stays with the land, so we're still a PIP.
Yeah.
And if anything happens over there, we will be notified. But as far as any further testing, the man's filed for the financial inability, and it's valid until February 22nd, 2021.
Yeah.
And then they have to renew it, every year.
Okay.
So we're still concerned with the PCBs and the fishing that goes on at Bush Pond, and there's no signage. I drove by the other day and Monday morning, and 2 kids were fishing, and one was fishing at the dam.
So the question was from
We had
someone else, was whether that pond is town property or private property, and whether we were able to post
Yeah.
on private
We
property.
already agreed to post at our
Right.
last meeting.
Yeah.
We agreed to post, but then town administrator said she wasn't sure whether it was our property to post on.
Well, you could post the other side, and people would still read it.
Well,
Right, the other side is town property.
is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we're on the record here. I think we'd ask you, on TV, we'd ask you, what do you want to do there? And I think also now we know the amount and levels of toxins in the area and the accessibility. It's not posted. It's used people fishing on the dam. What does the town believe should be done as far as keeping people from getting injured from the toxins? What's a responsible thing to do? What do our other towns do? We don't know.
So, I think the one that I haven't heard back, I contacted the Department of Public Health at the state level to just clarify with them whether that's something that they can do as a local Board of Health to post that, or that has to come through the State Department of Public Health. For example, I fish with my son where it's posted, not to consume it, and we fish and we release, so we're not consuming it. So it's they're listing, so I wanted to hear back from this. I don't think it was necessarily, at least, want to be sure that if we're posting it, we can, who posts it and properly post it, so there isn't any liability exposure to whoever's posting, because, again, it's kind of,
Yeah, but the town does own the bridge, and that's where people are
Right.
fishing from, so you could post
and
it
I
on
do,
the
and I
bridge.
think, I don't want to say, it makes, and I totally agree with you about the posting, but I will say that fishing and catching, are they, I don't know a lot of, I'm sure there are people, but most people that fish recreationally around here don't fish and eat it necessarily, but it's not saying it shouldn't be posted, but I'm
Right.
just,
Well, a neighbor has seen somebody with a cooler. You don't bring a cooler unless you're gonna take the fish home.
well, unless you're bringing something to eat with you, but.
Well,
drink,
maybe that's
but-
true.
Maybe we can, maybe we get back on
So
track.
what I wanted,
Yeah.
so I want to do is just, I haven't heard back from them, I just want to be sure that through your local board, you can post it if you want. We don't own the other side, the whole entire pond, though. There's some private property that owns it, so. But the town does own Lawrence Street and the Causeway, that portion of it, but both sides are bound, there's a town piece and then private property piece, so.
Has anybody tested any of the fish? Any of the benthic organisms in that pond to prove, to have some kind of reason to post,
Well, there were,
other than knee jerk?
Well, we know historical data, that there is a higher concentration of certain elements. We know arsenic is out there, we know lead is out there. But the question is, what does that mean in terms of accumulation in the fish tissues? We don't have any data on that. There is a standard sign that says if you're fishing in a freshwater body in Massachusetts, proceed at your own risk, because there's contamination almost any place you look, for mercury and a bunch of other elements. And so just having a standard, this is a sign that says you should be careful if you're fishing in this pond and don't eat the fish.
That makes sense, because you have to be careful what your warning people are if you have no data for it. But you could do a warning,
It's a generic statewide warning is what we're talking about.
That sounds good. That sounds like a reasonable thing to do.
That's what you had talked about the last time, right?
Yes, exactly.
It says there's an official, you saw the document, it's a very nice looking sign.
Yeah.
You can probably blow it up a little bit so you can read it.
And the town does own the bridge.
There it is.
There it is. This is from North Attleboro, but this says fish contaminated with mercury. This is the one. We can't say that the fish are contaminated with mercury, so we were going to modify the sign.
Yeah.
That's where we left it last week, last
So
meeting,
generic.
that we
Right,
would
that's-
modify the sign.
That's what-
That might be a great lake, and it could have been posted from the state, 'cause the state.
The state does test certain lakes, like
Great lakes.
Pop.
I mean, there will have warnings
what do we
going
say,
out
the name-
for it, but-
What is the lake here in Norfolk?
Populatic.
Populatic, I
Yeah.
want to say Popawesset. Populatic is one of the lakes that has mercury in it, according to the state.
Yes.
But who owns that? Is that privately owned, or do we still have our,
Well,
I
if it's-
mean,
if it's a
that's-
great pond, don't we have some kind of restriction or jurisdiction
Well, you
over
got
it?
some boat ramps, that'd be a great place to put a sign.
okay, so
We don't own it all,
we
but,
could-
there's
It's
access to it.
private, but
Yeah.
I think the generic warning signs is a smart thing to do. I drove by there the other day too, after you mentioned it, I said, people fishing there. I drove by and there's 3 boys fishing, and the guy picked up this huge mud pout, out of it. He had a pretty nice big fish. I said, wow, people are
This is
catching.
Populatic?
No, this is on
Oh.
Orange Street. So people are fishing there, and putting a generic sign there would probably be a warning.
You said a generic sign? Not that one.
The State Board of Health has a generic sign for warnings in freshwaters for pregnant women and children not to consume the fish.
Says
That's
that.
their general warning. That's not that sign.
But that's usually
another
for,
one.
Yeah.
for lakes that they're testing for lead and mercury and stuff.
The Charles River watershed, would they test? Did we talk to anyone about getting it
They
tested?
only test for certain micro.
Oh, that's right, that's right. So
They don't
somebody did
touch.
inquire
We're
about
supposed
that.
to document certain chemicals of fish, it'd be better off just to have, to have some proof on it. But if not, I think the
Yeah.
I
generic.
think we're safe with the generic. Let's just-
So you
let's
want
just-
it-
It's quicker.
Generic sign, a signpost,
At Bush Pond and Populatic.
Populatic has,
Has mercury, according to
yeah, so that one
the-
probably could be.
This one could be used there.
Yeah, so that one could actually,
And there's boat ramps there too, this town, boat ramps. Populatic.
Is anybody fishing at the town pond? I think I asked that the last time.
I don't even know.
No, it's not a
about
town pond.
Well, that's the one behind the old town hall.
Yeah, there is one down there.
Okay, there.
no, nobody's,
Nobody
well,
fishes there.
there could be people fishing back there, but, so, no fishing, generic and one is a,
Yeah, maybe we should, do you have a copy, electronic copy of the state one? You
Okay.
circulated it the last time.
Yeah, I
That's
did,
fine.
I'd have to s-
Let's go see his
pull it
next
up
step.
again.
when's your next
A couple
meeting?
of them have next meeting.
October 22nd?
Well,
So
we
it's
haven't
heard?
agreed on that, but we think so.
All right, so we'll take care of that.
But that's-
Um,
no, that's right.
Back to David's original question. You invoked the letters EPA. Were you thinking about actually taking this to the next level?
It's PCBs. And I guess, this first came in 2014, there was, an ordinance, and it was brought up that, that this had some waste on it. Ironically, it was also brought up by the applicant that we could pretty much negotiate to put a town well down there. That's off the table now, and that, 24 months ago was the first time I got and talked about current concerns about cancer and other health hazards. So Now we're in 28 months, 1 day and 9 hours. Tick, tick, tick. People are drinking the water. You got a Gold Street well down there. Franklin's got tested for chromium-6 and has been positive before. Testing is spot testing at 1 hour or, 3 days or whatever, and they take these tests out of Buckley Man, and they all come up positive with something. And the MCP limits and everything are great for making big decisions, but we have a piece of property now that's sitting there for 2 years. And to the best of my knowledge, the town isn't testing the public wells for some of the things that are down there. And that's of great concern. So I guess I want to answer your question after I went through that all. And I guess we're asking you how we can be helpful. But from the Board of Health meeting we had, I went and looked for it, I think it was 7 months ago when Paul was here from Winston Sampson. He did say that this is handled by the EPA. Okay? DEP has one expert on it. I haven't had anything in writing from her, but this can go to EPA.
I think it would, at least,
Well,
So does
we
that
do
give
have
us?
data, we do have data from our well sites,
Yeah,
because it has been tested.
I think a good route to take would be that the water department communicate with the DEP all the time regarding their municipal wells. It's permitted through the DEP, and they could bring the reports from Lawrence Street to their attention, and when they test it, and they can ask them, what should we test for, extra? Bring it to their attention.
Well, Betsy, didn't we in fact get some data, I thought we did from the DP, from the water department. I thought they had tested either the exploratory well that's just downstream.
That was tested, yeah.
They
We did get, Sandy got that document with the help of
But that was a
the town.
clean, that was an extensive suite of,
2014 or 15?
No, they just tested
They-
down, they tested for dioxin.
They didn't do
and-
comprehensive testing.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but they
I
just
thought they
tested
had
it.
PCBs were on their list.
I don't know, Sandy, do you have that on your phone?
Well, I don't know if they tested PCBs. I mean,
I-
we really didn't know about PCBs.
But that was so
until
long ago.
March of this year.
Does it travel?
But they just
Well, that's
tested.
the problem,
Well,
is
no,
are things still moving?
We need to
Hey,
check into that.
I'm not an expert,
I mean,
I'm talking personally, not in expert capacity.
3 decades. It's
But
been-
we spent hundreds of hours. We retained our own LSP. We all know there's PCBs down there. There's a PCB down there that no one can say why it's there or how it's there. And so I want to put it to the Board of Health, is what would you like to do as the Board of Health? And we're talking about public water supply, and we're not talking about private. So I think it's the public one we're really talking about. We don't know if it's moving.
What did your professional tell you? How did he consult you? You just said just PCBs and then walked away.
The professional is, my professional, he's not working on behalf of the town or anyone in particular.
But you said
What
you
he-
hired your
what he-
own. You hired your own
Absolutely.
expert. So what did he have to say about the PCBs?
He says
and
is that
location?
the PCBs are rare, 1268 is what it is, and that it's under jurisdiction of EPA.
What about the movement, the location?
I
of
don't
it?
have any information, I'm not an expert on that.
What did he say? Or maybe you should ask him.
So
You should ask the town
that's-
LSP,
been
you have
answered.
your own LSP, you should talk to your town
Yeah.
LSP.
All the
I can't, there's a conflict there, I can't speak on behalf of the work that the LSP is doing. Does that make sense to people? Okay.
Do somewhat.
Didn't we ask Franklin, because their well is there?
Yeah, I
We
mean,
just
when-
recently asked Franklin
And they said they
last
tested
month,
for it,
and
they
tested
didn't
the
detect PCBs.
No,
But-
no,
Maybe
I'm
that's
not
what
saying
getting
they
this
are, I'm
from.
just asking,
Yeah.
I'm asking an open question, I'm not saying you need to do anything.
Well, no, we
I'm
did
asking you-
follow up, because I know the question was raised, and I emailed them back
Yeah, that was
about
last week.
those correspondence emails that they did test, that they didn't detect PCBs.
That was
um,
Franklin.
And so that was Franklin, I don't know about, to double check on when they looked at the well for that property for the missile. Well, so 1268 is
Yeah.
the PCB, and that's tied to the EPA.
Right.
I mean, I guess-
Paul was here,
No,
what, 7 months ago, whatever,
Yeah.
he went through this.
No, I
When they
understand.
first got a hit on it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you all do remember that conversation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think, so one thing we do, well, at least where we are now, at least we do know that this was an unknown.
yeah, well,
Whether or not we had suspicions that the way things were headed, that they were gonna try to file this
Yeah,
financial
sure.
inability. And they have now, and it has been granted, and it's in place. However, I guess contact an EPA to have some idea of what's involved, you know.
Is our LSP still on the account, or
No.
are they off?
They're off.
it was in scope to evaluate the downgrading risk on the town property that was given to you by LaRusso?
So we haven't done anything since earlier in the, we haven't done downgrade. So, again, this, talking with Paul McKinley before, this down gradient, and then whether you do sampling, and there's a lot of, you need to be mindful of how you approach these things, and how liability exposure comes if you're testing, and then,
Yeah,
now, who it points back to and who takes ownership of it, so,
can I just be candid?
yep.
If you test it and you find it, the town is responsible for it. That's downgrading. And the town, my understanding is the town would have to prove that the contaminants didn't come from that property and flow downstream. I believe that's what Mr. McCarthy said in this meeting at one time.
McKinley.
No, actually Frank said that
Yeah.
in a meeting too. And then Paul reinforced the concern about liability.
Right.
And we can go get cited off the videos, but that's
Yeah,
what
we
we're
can,
saying.
so that's definitely,
You've got the property, you can test on your property. There are 2 test wells down there. It appears that one has been disassembled. And so that's, I'm not sure why or how that happened, but if we want to walk down there and look at it, there are 2 test holes down there that, prior landowner must have tested there too. That could be a start.
and I know this property, well, not this property owner, but the representative did not give anybody consent to go onto their property to do testing. I mean, that was something
Yeah.
that was discussed at the last, it was, I'm not sure if it was here or another meeting, but we talked about that. I guess it makes sense to have this conversation with the EPA.
Right.
I just want to be, and I'm not trying to sidestep a contamination issue, okay? But we also need to be, there's a whole host of people that we're working for, which is the residents of the town too. We need to make sure we do things properly, so we don't expose ourselves and create, we're trying to go after one thing and expose the town for something that if they had the knowledge, they might say, well, let's approach it this way versus another. So I don't want to, I think, I don't want to react and make,
I understand that.
and there's definitely, and we're not saying, we know there's PCBs, that's,
Yeah.
they've had it, but,
So I just want to remind you, we have all these videos.
yeah.
And there was a time where Frank McCarthy, who's a senior
McCarty?
partner. McCarty, yeah, is it McCarty?
I'm McCarthy, he's Riccardi, that Frank.
Frank Riccardi and Paul McKinley.
Paul McKinley. So Frank said he's walked the property and thought the velocity of the water wouldn't be a risk, but he said, went back and looked at it, that he is concerned that there's contamination there. So I know it might be expensive to clean up, but I think it could be more expensive and put the town at risk legally if you don't go down and clean it up. So that's just something to consider. You're the Board of Health, and it's not on the ZBA's jurisdiction. If Weston Sampson still isn't, under contract with you, that's
right now they're not.
something to consider.
Yeah.
Because every day, tick, 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 we're into 28 months
Who
now.
actually has sort of the technical expertise? Certainly the water department does, in terms of the folks that they hire to do the testing, for example, and interpretation of the results, because they do that routinely. And so I'm wondering whether, in terms of getting some data to maybe help us a little bit, because right now we just have a couple of data points
Mhm.
and not much else, and very little downstream impact of any kind. We know that the Franklin well is clean. The question is there other sites there that we need to be checking?
Well,
Certainly Gold Street, sure, we should check it.
So Environmental Partners is the consulting company that does at least they work with
Maybe we
it.
need to meet with the water department and simply say, hey, guys, we have mutual interest in this site. You're downstream of it somewhat,
Mhm.
and we have a town-wide issue we need to confront.
This is pretty tricky stuff, because when the chromium-6 came up, we discussed that. Was it Whitewater, someone was contracted, and the report was done, town paid for a report on chromium-6? It came back, and it was negative. We'd asked
The
for
town
some.
tested for
Yeah.
chromium-6.
Yeah, so there was a company that tested for the town, and that was very helpful, because it kind of, okay, we have it, it's on site, but we don't have it where it's tested. And just a suggestion, when you talk to the water department, when you do these things, I would do it in writing and just write down what you're doing. Because, we got that report, it's very helpful to alleviate the concerns, but, so I think that's, I'm gonna kind of just summarize. You have people who are interested, we have a process and a plan, we have resources, we have legal resources, financial resources, we want to see it cleaned up. If you need us to put things together with what's been organized already, everything's available from Mabit. There's a trail of things that happened after Mabit resigned, but if you would like to pursue approaching the EPA, there's a couple of ways to do that. The town can do it, because it's in your best interest to do it, or a group, public interest group can do it, or NGO can do it. NGO's very easy to get involved. Toxic Action Center, there's several, Conservation Law Foundation. I think before things happen, the town needs to take a position on it, and should do things in writing. Any other suggestions?
Is there any way to compel the landowners? Do they have any kind of records from what they were manufacturing, who might have been dumping there?
There's pretty good documentation going back to '86. And we've got some aerials, U.S. Department of Agriculture aerials, that shows the trenches going in and things. So there's a tremendous amount of information, and millions of dollars, I believe, is spent in testing by the applicant and lots of reports. So I think to get to the point of it, there's big problems down there. The applicant was going to step in, do the dam, do a bunch of things. There's no reason for anyone to do. As a matter of fact, the activity use limitation has been lifted. That area doesn't need to be monitored anymore. So it can just sit there, all right? And people use it. I've used that property for years for recreation. A lot of people do. But I just think it just gnaws at me that we have those chemicals that close to the river. And I think the town in general should get together and think about the fact that they own that land, and that land has not been tested, and that Weston Sampson has said that they walked the property. I think it should be tested. And then another meeting said it was in the scope of work for the extension, so I don't know if that is still in the scope of work, if there's still funds available for it, but that's our belief. So a lot to think about. We'll come back in 2 weeks, month, if you want to take it into
Well,
consideration.
you're welcome anytime. I think what we need to do is reach out to some other parts of the town governance body, and also reach out to the state too, for that matter. I mean, there is a Department of Environmental Protection in the state, and they're overwhelmed, but, well, actually, they know very well what's going on here.
Yeah, Sandy and I went and met with them, and they're actually very helpful, very candid, and seem to be on top of the, what might happen, like this financial inability we talked about. There was a liaison to all the other departments within the DEP, who was very helpful, and gave us some ideas about how to get some of the things tested that may be on public waterway that you get to in flotation device legally. I mean, they were very helpful.
So do they actually have advice on what to do next once the financial,
No,
restrictions?
no, I think we know the answer to that, but that's a very good point. You can contact them. It's Rebecca Woolley.
Mhm.
She's very responsive. And if you'd like to go down there and have a meeting with them, with us, it would save a little friction if someone wants to do that. But they'd be very open to sitting down with us, they'll get a couple of people together, because they know what this is. And we're familiar with the property. Who's the person who's assigned to it, the regional person, what's his name? Do you remember?
Joe Lawton.
Joe Lawton. So Joe was right on top of things, we had communicating with with the LSPs and with the applicant, and was up to speed on things.
What is Joe's last name?
Lawton.
LAWTON.
So that would be, I think, a good next step for the town. And then what we'll wait to hear back on is whether this should go to another level of federal government, which might be helpful for getting funding for cleanup or designation. That's not DEP's thing, from what I understand. That's more of an activist thing.
All right.
Okay? All right, thanks very much, and we appreciate everything you and the other boards do, the amount of time, the hours you spend. We really do. We've been at this 28 months now formally on the ZBA. There's been, 18 continuances and canceled meetings and deferrals and things. So it's extremely frustrating to us to see a project under consideration for this long. We hope that tomorrow night they'll take that off the table, Abbeville off the table. Because to have it entangled in a new development, I think is very bad for the town. To say we've been at something 28 months deliberating a development, and guess what? Now that big chunk of land has gone away, but we want to keep the option open to go back and be involved with Buckley and Mann. So you may be able to speak with the zoning board and have them think about liability to the town if that stays entangled under that application. Okay? I mean, just something to think about. We certainly are thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So can we, at a minimum, get the complete water report? I don't think we've seen that of the wells, Gold Street. Wade, you're saying it's not close at all to,
Gold, is the water north or south flowing through Orange Street underneath it? When you stand on the bridge, is it going north or south?
it's
the water?
the Mill River?
It's heading toward the Mill River, it's heading toward the
It's going
Charles.
north.
It's going
It's
north.
going
Yeah.
north.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it looks,
So Gold could possibly,
it'll be a
Well, it's a-
mile or
it's a
two.
stretch.
it's pretty far away, yeah.
Right, but that's our closest water supply, right?
Gold Street?
To the south.
To this side.
Down gradient, yes.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, we can at least get those reports, the complete report, because what, as residents, you don't get the complete report, they just give us,
Yeah, I thought we got everything and sent it to you before, from the Gold
I
Street.
had the, yeah.
I mean, we'll look and
The
see.
landfill,
The landfill?
the landfill reports we get.
Yeah, but they had forwarded the report,
Yeah, we
Never
got
seen
some,
that.
we did.
because they asked from the
Well,
water.
then, before we ask, we should look in the file and see if it's in there, I guess.
Yeah, we can take a look at the file.
Okay.
Some of the parameters you may not test for because it doesn't
Well,
travel
this is what
cross elimination.
we're wondering, what do they test for? But besides that,
But I think,
to a point of.
could sit
talking
down,
to-
set an appointment with the water department, with
So
yourself.
just to make sure we have all the data
Yeah.
that's available, I think we already have a lot. And we do, I remember now, it was the Franklin folk who did have some PCP data that was basically clean.
Correct, yeah.
And, maybe talk to DEP, maybe they
I
have some
mean,
good ideas.
if I
for where to
remember
go
right,
next.
go to the correspondence of Franklin, they aware of this site contamination, they did test for it. They ordinarily don't normally test for it, but they did test for it.
Mhm.
But I think sitting down with the War Department too, between maybe this and next meeting,
Mhm.
would be helpful. And then, like I said, if we could get a meeting with DEP, sit down.
Mhm.
Of course, the other question is, you know, people have wells in that area, so even though it's not affecting, you know, public drinking water that people who don't have wells use, it's affecting drinking water of those that have wells. It could be, I don't know.
That's a good point. We do our well tests. We do a suite of volatile organics. Are PCBs on that list? No.
It's like a special test.
Yeah.
And also, if you get a hit somewhere, like 2 or 3 miles away, you also have to prove that the origin of the pollution is from where you think it might be.
Sure. I mean, I know up there we've had, over the years, some spikes and things like arsenic that were
But
above
arsenic is-
average.
Yeah, some of that stuff is natural.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it could easily be.
Yeah, and if it's coming.
We've always suspected it was, but we know it's there. Yeah.
I would talk to water experts that do water all the time, that test wells with the Commonwealth all the time. And then there's the DEP departments looking at the hazardous waste, and they can possibly get together and talk also, if they're not the same people, and start using the resources you have at the state level.
Mhm.
It's
Well-
when you test for PCBs, do you also, is it one, is it like a cocktail? Or are you,
Yeah.
would you be
There's
just
a- there's a
testing for this
suite of
one
PCBs.
specific one that we're
What are,
talking
there are, how
about?
many are there, 8 that they test for typically? 8 to 12?
All the PCBs, the primary ones are 8, but you can go to 12.
Okay.
This particular test is what's called the 8270, which is semi-volatiles. And it's the same test that you run for pesticides as well. And that being said, PCBs are not known to dissolve in water. They will adhere to molecules, and typically the bigger issue, short-term, long-term for PCBs is the carrier agent, which is usually a chlorinated solvent or some type of mineral oil that tends to be part of the leading code. So PCBs moving in the subsurface is not going to happen very quickly. It can happen, but once, we've seen over there, it's definitely in the sediment in the river, and it just tumbles during flood events. And I know that, Rich, I think the concern about doing a downgrading property status for town property was looked at.
So short term, I think meeting with the water department, but meeting with the consultant who does, so Environmental Partners does the consulting work for the water department as far as exploring the well sites, and they were involved with this when they looked at this property before, a few years ago.
Right.
Environmental Partners was the company who had worked with the water department to explore that site. They're the ones that are more recent, now currently involved with the Holbrook Street well and had in the past. So they're kind of the professionals that would be good to sit down with as far as this conversation goes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, the water department, but they're the water department's gonna, defer to that company.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
They have on staff,
Yeah.
on hired people that we
Yeah,
can
so
talk to.
we could talk to Bob and about that discussion with yourself to start.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's start with that.
And then,
And the DEP.
The DEP, and then the next meeting is, I know I'm jumping ahead on you, but,
Next meeting.
yeah. Is it gonna be October 22nd?
I have it down tentatively, because we said the 3rd. That's actually the 4th Wednesday, but.
Okay.
Does that look like the case?
Sure.
All right.
So 3 weeks from today.
Till the 22nd.
So then we have a deadline imposed for this task.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
You're not going anywhere, right, for the next 3 weeks?
No.
I'm just checking.
I gotta be in my classroom 6 days a week, so.
Oh, nice, all right, so at least.
Can
All
I
right.
just say one more thing? So to Andy's point, the PCBs most likely are gonna adhere to the sediment. That's where we found them in the Mill River from the testing, in the sediment. So you have to, find a pocket where, it's on town property and maybe get some sediment. That might be, indicative of any travel. So you're probably not gonna find it just in the water.
The data that was reported by our LSPs, that was sediment data or was that soil data?
Both.
Both?
It's definitely in the soil, and it's also in 2 locations.
In the
by
river?
Mill River, in the sediment.
Yeah, there's a dike, all right, where the carbonizer lagoon had broken down, and so they dredged the carbonizer lagoon. This is in some of that documentation. They built a dike. And the dike is less than a foot wide, and that's where the tests are, is in that dike. So literally, when it floods, the water comes right up over into carbonizer's bed. So it's close, it's right there. And if you want to walk the town property down there, there are some, there are some places where things could get caught. There is some flock in the areas. It's easier to see when there's snow on the ground. But if you want to know where to put a fork in, I think we could probably show you some areas of interest.
Yeah, well, we may not be doing any site walks right away since we no longer have access.
Oh, you do?
Town property do.
Yeah, you can get
Town
there
property?
without breaking any
Where's the
rules.
town property down there?
You have Franklin Town Property, and you can go to the end of Meadowlark, and there's abandoned
I
railroad.
thought you meant
lane.
of the lagoon. Now you're talking about downstream.
Yeah, downstream.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. There's some bluffs there, and some places where, waste and collect on the town property.
Okay.
And you might ask whoever donated the property, why those wells, test wells were down there too.
Okay. So, anything else?
See you
Tonight,
next week.
folks?
Thanks so much. Be here,
Hey, guys. On our list, MRC updates, are we
You
there?
wanna do the minutes?
Oh, minutes. Where is that?
What was that? You kinda jumped. So,
Okay. Minutes.
I'll excuse myself a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Been a pleasure as always, sir.
Thanks.
Where's the minutes?
so we have minutes.
Minutes, there you go. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the August 22nd, 2019 Board of Health meeting.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we have minutes from September 30th.
What?
That was our
Is that
meeting.
right?
Yeah, that was our meeting
Oh,
yesterday.
yesterday.
that was a meeting.
Is this the most
I
efficient
was
woman
gonna
in the
ask
whole
when we
world?
posted that.
Wow.
That was
Or did you get a chance to quickly look at this? It's-
No, I didn't. I had no idea these even existed.
Well, I didn't either.
I know, I
Yeah.
stuck it in
You're right on
there.
top
I
of
wanted
things,
to, I
Betsy.
needed to make,
So
I needed to do it while it was still fresh in my mind.
Yes, and you did a good job.
Is it-
The important
Did you read
thing.
these?
No, Betsy put them in our pile.
Oh,
I was stuck-
okay, so
I
you
was
have
pretty
these.
quick.
So
Well, I
we'll do
read
that.
them.
We are reading them
while I was
now.
waiting
Okay.
for us to come.
It was a quick recap.
Nice history here.
So I think the bottom line is that Blythe asked us to develop a list of goals and to provide her with services. That's really what we left with
Mhm.
yesterday, so we'll do that.
Yes.
Okay, so is that okay?
Yep.
And
Okay.
did she want something by a specific date? 'Cause
Well,
she's gonna
she
be-
was hopeful that she could get it by next week, because she had a meeting with some of the other town administrators, so I'll try and put together what's been going on in my head for the last 6 months. And then Betsy can add it to
Circulate it
you.
around.
I
Thank you.
copied that out today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you printed the whole
I
thing?
printed the whole thing.
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't work.
All right.
Okay, so I make a motion that we accept the minutes of
September
Board of
30th?
Health meeting, September 30th, 2019.
Sure, it just seems like it was yesterday.
I second that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay.
Right.
And just quickly, MRC updates.
Yep.
So we had our first meeting, we scheduled, it was very successful. We had a presentation of MRC 101 by a regional coordinator, and we scheduled for the rest of the year a sheltering workshop in November, and, in October, ICS training, which, Incident Command System training. The coordinator is going to, the MRC coordinator, regional coordinator is going to also do that with another individual, another region coordinator. And so that's in October. November is sheltering and CPR training in February, Stop the Bleed training in March, and hopefully a mental health training as well. So, yeah, it's moving.
Yeah.
And we also talked about the emergency dispensing site plan that we continue to work on, and the flu clinic, and
I talked with Ed Nolan about being included in our local emergency plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I did mention that in a gathering we had some time ago. Hey, look, guys, people are already doing this.
so we have work to do about.
Flu clinic is on Wednesday, October 16th, from 9 to 11.
11:30, actually.
11:30 at the senior center. I was gonna give you all of some.
October 16th?
October 16th at the senior center,
That's a Wednesday.
9 to 11:30.
Hmm.
All are welcome. Just bring insurance cards.
I have a class. I'll be there.
I'm in surgery.
Your surgery.
Okay, you can go to Walgreens and
Okay.
get your flu
Yep.
shot though.
You're not very far. Okay, is that it, Marcy, then? That's-
Yes, that's
all
it.
right. We have a meeting scheduled, unanticipated new business.
I think we already have
Please,
it.
no new business.
Do you want me to look into the garbage grinder situation, on-site septic system?
Well, you know what? I think the time has come to revisit that, yeah. And look at our options.
What are other towns, do other towns have the same?
There are towns that just have regulations from Title V only. There are towns that have their own, majority of the towns have their own regulations. It's really far and few that towns just run the Title V regulation. The regulations were requiring garbage grinders in new construction. They were usually, I mean, my predecessor's towns that he worked at. So there were like 5 towns that had it, because he's the one that approached the boards of health in those towns, and the towns accepted it.
But they had to increase the size of the
Yes,
systems.
because they have that.
To do that.
regulation in there. Correct, that's correct. Norfolk's one, Rentham's one, Plainville might be one.
Probably Medfield then too.
Maybe Medfield. I know one of them actually changed it. He left the town.
Just say, my initial reaction is, okay, if we're gonna back away a little bit from the idea, it's all gotta be designed one level with 165 gallons per bedroom, to the point where, okay, if you specify that you're not going to put a garbage grinder in, okay, put it in writing, put it on the deed, and then we'll say fine. That will give us some coverage. It's not gonna stop the Home Depot exuberant individual who would just override that, but it's a little bit more control than not.
If someone goes to the grocery store and buys milk, perishable foods, they buy it at a certain temperature that's quality controlled, and the consumer takes it and brings it home, they put it in the refrigerator, and it's a bad refrigerator, and the food goes bad. It's not the town's fault or the store's fault, it's the person's home, how they're dealing with their own stuff. So if you have someone living in a house with a septic design that doesn't need a garbage grinder, they run out and put one in without researching it, and they made a bad decision, and they'll be paying for the consequences by upgrading it in a few years.
Well, exactly, that's exactly the point. So at least if they bought that house, well, no, this is already, they put it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, so you
But
might.
at least it'd be or if it was a newer house, there would have been something on the deed that said, oh, garbage grinder. Well, maybe they don't read the deed, maybe they have no idea.
So your concern would be a home buyer,
And
somebody
the
who would.
next buyer.
Who would, yes, altered.
It would be in
Their
the Title
home
V
without-
report, just, for information, the Title V inspector does check off garbage, grinder, yes or no. And that's a form that has to be presented to anybody buying a piece of property.
Does a,
So-
But how
so-
would they know that?
Well, because they
It
would
shouldn't
read
have,
the.
it
well,
shouldn't have been a garbage disposal in there.
Well, the access of knowledge of what their system has would be, could also be presented another way through a Title V report, not necessarily the deed. Because putting something on a deed, you go down, you record it, it stays on the deed forever. The design itself, the engineers put down, no garbage grinder on it.
so that's on Title V, so if I sold my house and pulled the Title V permit so I could sell the house, it would say no garbage grinder.
Well, it would check off if you didn't have one. The inspector would go, garbage grinder, no garbage grinder, no garbage grinder. So I buy the house, oh, no garbage grinder, and you got one in there. What's going, oh, I check out I do my own research, check out the septic system, oh, no garbage grinder. They got one in the kitchen, and all that should go off. I mean,
Well, yeah, I
It's-
mean, that's the downside of having basically the ability to,
Because if someone puts a garbage
Circumvent
grinder
this.
in and it fails prematurely, it's an individual choice. It's not affecting the community in itself.
Right.
It's not
No,
like
but
they're-
the
it's not like they're
next
burning-
buyer-
It's not like they're burning trash in the backyard, controlled trash. You guys, oh, well, I'll just burn the backyard and smoke goes in the neighbor's yard, it
Yeah.
becomes a nuisance. I mean, that affects the community itself.
But the next buyer who expected that septic system was gonna last for, I don't know, how
But
many
the
years.
Title V inspection will let you know that it is.
Well, then you might not buy the
Whatever.
property, I guess.
You can go into used cars the same way. I mean, you can buy a vehicle, you can go into the furnace, the hot water
well,
tank.
but my wait is that you have a person that doesn't really understand this. It goes off and gets his garbage grinder because, wants the ability to just flush everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't even think about the fact that, hey, look, what's down below you in the ground is not designed to handle that. So it's
So that
Get
one.
Sewage back up in their toilets, don't they?
So that, well, yeah, also, if you don't put in the filters, you get sewage back up too. So that one person that maybe came up that buys a garbage grinder and sticks it in their house and makes a mistake, everybody in the town has to have the design for a garbage grinder, because there might be that one person walking around that's a little bit lost, and everybody else has to put a huge garbage grinder. That's how I'm thinking, we're, the public health, concern. I mean, how much alarms do you want to
Oh, I
put
know.
out there?
I get it.
And it's just
I
food
get
for
it.
thought, and it's because this board can do that. I mean, I'm just here to talk to you guys, I'm not trying to do anything, just give me one side of the story.
Yeah.
If you want me to go to the other side, you can go to the other side too, but, I'm just thinking common sense.
Well, we promised we'd talk about this next time anyway, it's
Okay.
getting late.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you for doing that.
let's bring it up.
So I think we
All right.
adjourn. Adjourn the meeting at 9:40 p.m.
Why don't we do that? There's a motion to adjourn,
I second that motion.
and second, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.